agenda as posted.
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor of establishing the agenda as posted, please say aye. Only board directors. Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, Deborah.
They voted yes.
Aye, okay.
Kids voted yes.
5-0. We have established the agenda. This is a special meeting. This is a study session. We can't take any action at this session. And we can just get started. So our first item is staff experience level report.
Great. Going to turn it over to our HR team. This was stemming from a conversation that we had a couple meetings ago, and you had requested some information, just kind of where does our staff fall when it comes to our salary schedule. So I'll turn it over to Aaron, have our team introduce themselves. You don't always get to see some of the people who do all of the behind the scenes work, and so it's great to have them here this morning.
Yeah, good morning, thanks for having us. I will let my colleagues introduce themselves when it's their turn. But I just want to bring them down here because they do all the work behind the scenes. They'll be the experts and be able to answer questions that you might have. A couple meetings ago, there were two questions kind of asked. One was like, where does our staff fit on the seniority scale in terms of pay? And also questions about kind of part-time staff. How does that affect the budget, things like that. So we're here to present both of those things to you today. Andres, can you pull up the first tab? I saw you had it up there. We'll send this out to you, but we were feverishly just making sure, double, triple checking this morning to make sure we had everything correct. But I think unsurprisingly, our staff tends to be experienced and well-educated. So on this, and Andrews, I don't know how big you can make that. This is what's called a scattergram, and the scattergram is kind of two axes. One is steps of experience on the left, kind of column A, and then in row 1 is kind of their levels of education. And so the upper left-hand corner would be our brand new baby teachers that are just coming out of college with a bachelor's degree and no experience. So, and you can see we only have one teacher in that, and this is all planned for next year, by the way. This is not current, this is what we're projecting for next year. We're projecting that we're gonna have one teacher teach one class in that upper section, because we tend to, in Mercer Island, the quality of applicants we get tends not to lead to us hiring brand new teachers right out of school. We tend to have teachers that are middle experience or on the higher end, but also educated, master's degrees plus. And in fact, Angela will talk about in her comments what we actually budget for when we do have an open position. But as you look, these are all number FTE associated with different columns. So if you look, most of our teachers, I think the highest number I see on there is around 70. You might see in one more than that, but if you look where you see 70s, it's the master's plus 90 and 12 years. I think that says 70. And then,
Are you in that 90?
well, what's above it a couple? I can't even.
27.6.
Yes.
This is 7.03.
Oh, 7,
Yeah,
sorry.
so you're looking at 19 and master's plus 90 is 70.1.
Yeah, sorry, I had a decimal point in the wrong spot. So yeah, our most common is teachers master's plus 90 and 19 years, which is a very seasoned teacher that's highly educated. So I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that this is a place that we attract great teachers and we keep great teachers for long periods of time, which is great for our kids to put the most experienced and highly qualified teachers in front. Couple other notes on this is we value so much as a district, we value professional development, that we actually offer lots of clock hours to educate our teachers that does move them to the right more quickly than maybe some other districts around because of all those clock hours we have that we provide to staff free based on the professional development that we host here in the district. So ultimately, that's kind of where we are. Like I said, I don't think this is a surprise to us. The last thing I would say before I kind of kick it to Angela to give any things, because she was the creator of this scattergram, is that when I just think it's exemplary that we have such great teachers and such experienced teachers. We were yesterday at the retirement celebration, losing a lot of the people on the bottom right. I can think of an example, and this kind of ties in some couple conversations today, that Julie Biggs was she's the art teacher at IMS, she was one of the retirees. And we're actually trying to hire for her position today. And both applicants we are thinking about hiring are kind of middle of this graph. So even when somebody leaves, we don't necessarily trade a bottom right for an upper left, if that makes sense. It's kind of, we trade a bottom right where Julie Biggs would be for kind of a middle, because that's where we tend to get our applicants for. So, yeah.
Can I just jump in with a question?
Sure.
So just to clarify, the steps are equal to years until you hit 19, and then you just stay at level 19,
Yeah, I'll
correct?
kick that to Angela.
Yeah, is that right? Okay,
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
And then, and we keep referring to Angela. Angela, says Angela here, you don't have a little placard, but Angela is the Human Resources Coordinator that primarily supports certificated staff, and Kathleen Long here is the Human Resources Coordinator who primarily supports our classified staff. And it's true, the steps correlate with experience, but we don't, step one is basically like you're new, so it says you have 0 experience, but you start at 1. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then if you look at Julie Biggs, she's been here for, I think it was like 30 some years.
A lot.
Which
We'll
is
say
a
that's fair.
very, very long period of time. But so the people who are in the 70.1, it's not that they've all been here 19 years. They could have been here 35, 27,
Yeah.
whatever it happens to be. So that's just where our schedule stops. And one advantage of our schedule, at least historically, has been that you get to the top faster. Where some people you go to 14 and then 25 is the next high. So that's why sometimes, if you recall past bargain discussions, like it's difficult sometimes to compare your highest and your lowest because the highest is variable depending on districts. Now, I think there's been some reset in the region where that's sort of collapsed, but that's where that is. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Angela, as you were looking at this or creating this, was there any insight that you?
For this scattergram specifically, it gives us a path for when we're budgeting. So right now, I'm budgeting my open positions at MA 90 step 14. That's where a bulk of our staff are, so trying to be conservative and make sure we have margin. If I have any open positions, for now, that's where I'm planning for them to land, as a for example. And then there is a step 0 for some of our incoming staff that don't have any experience, because this is based on budget. Everyone in the budget at least has a teeny tiny bit of experience because they're coming back to us. So the schedule you'll see posted online will have a step 0. This schedule doesn't, because no one is in a 0 yet. So
Okay,
just
one
remember.
more related question,
Sure.
and then Dan also has a question.
Of course.
If someone comes in from, say, a different school district,
Mm-hmm.
is their level based on their level in their old district, or do you kind of negotiate that with them?
Correct. So OSPI defines what a certificated year of experience is, and all Washington state school districts acknowledge that. So it doesn't matter if they've got most of their experience at a different district. When they come to us, that all is honored and they get placed on our schedule with the same years of experience.
Angela, is there a difference, just for the board, between, so out of state would not count?
No, out of state, if it's certificated.
Okay, out of state, and what about private schools?
That's a little grayer. There are some rules that apply, so we will go case by case, but if they did require a certificate, and they can sometimes get credit for that.
So some private school teachers have certificates, some don't, based on the needs.
It's less about them owning a certificate, it's more that the school requires that certificate to educate.
So you can't, even if you have certificate, if the job you were doing does not require it, then you can't get credit. So you can only get credit in most situations if there's a requirement of the position you're holding to have that certificate.
And that's a little different in the state of Washington than other states. It's variable, and sometimes that can come up. There are other states where districts don't have to accept more than 7 years. They don't have to, and so you tend to see less movement between districts and more movement between schools if people are looking for changes. But Washington has a pretty liberal policy or set of rules for that. So.
Yeah, a couple observations and then some questions. I mean, one is, definitely looks, as the comments have indicated, that a lot of our staff is in the higher sections of the wage chart. So it seems like in comparisons, when we compare ourselves to other districts for negotiating purposes, I mean, well, what's the comparison? I mean, a few of them seems like it's certainly the mode. I mean, what's the most common categorization? And then how do we compare? I mean, if you take, for instance, categories basically in all of column B and C, like there's minimal. And the same for, up through the first 6 rows, right? So I know that sometimes for sort of optics, people will anchor on the upper left quadrant because that shows a wage that's very low, particularly for this cost of region area. But it's a little bit of a head fake when the predominance of our salaries is not in that quadrant. So for comparative purposes, at least my perspective would be like, we gotta compare on those categories that are actually relevant. And then the other, the question is, I mean, certainly we can staff many more positions with more junior people for less cost. I mean, just the way that the compensation works. And so the question would be, for those first 5-6 years, I mean, do we see increased churn? I mean, I know that, frequently in other areas, it's not just training that you can get churn for younger workers, but sometimes it's, phenomenal. I mean, new ideas, energy, et cetera, as well as just being able to afford more people for the same money.
So
one is the question is if we track churn and sort of know what that looks like amongst, or, an idea, in the future to sort of say well, hey, we could get a young teacher, but in our experience, there's a 50% chance that after 2 years, if we get someone with less than 5 years experience, they're going to decide that public education isn't for them. Versus if we get someone that's older, there's less churn, and therefore putting aside other considerations, that makes it worthwhile.
So a little bit of what's our philosophy.
Yes.
And what's our approach? Maybe not philosophy, what's our approach to that? And so on, turn that.
But also, I interrupted your original presentation, so if you want to finish that first.
No, I don't think there was anything more on that. I think a couple things to think about is, one, making sure that when we do lose people, whether that's a reduction in force, whether it's non-refilling of positions, it does tend to be those people in the top or left, people that tend to, based on seniority, be the ones that, or unlimited contracts, be the ones that do go. So the churn is definitely much more.
Understood. I mean, putting aside bumping, I would say good point. Voluntarily.
Right. Yeah, I think people stay, and I think this is a great place to work. I think people stay. I think the data shows that. Aaron, I'll kick it to you. I don't have a lot of great thoughts around that, just because I've been in this system for 20 years, and I have stayed myself. And I think there's lots of people similar to me in that. Oh, Aaron, you want to talk?
Yeah, I would say the majority of people stay. We do have a pretty good retention here. We do monitor every resignation that we get, where there's a whole process where we get feedback as to why they're leaving. Typically, I mean, most of it is because someone's moving, or they're making different choices because of the birth of a child, change in family mix, etc. So that is most of the reasons, if it isn't retirement. I would say in their first year of employment, especially if they're a provisional 3, so someone who's experienced who then comes to us, there's sort of statutory structures that are set up where it's basically a provisional period of 1 year, where it's their opportunity to evaluate us, our opportunity to evaluate them, to figure out if their experience aligns with our needs and our student needs. So there'd be a little bit more churn with that group of people, and also their baby teachers then perhaps, or new teachers, sorry, not baby teachers, but the new to the profession, because people come to education all different types in the profession, right? It could be second careers, but there could be people who start this and think ultimately this isn't what I want, and choose. And we try to get that information to identify if there's any problems distinct within our system that would be encouraging or discouraging people to stay. But ultimately, in our hiring and selection, we're always looking at what does our system need and what will serve our kids well. And typically, the people we attract tend to be more seasoned and later on in their careers, and the people we retain tend to be more seasoned and later on in their careers. If that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just sort of a general comment, and we'll see how things evolve, but particularly with disruptions and uncertainty in tech, that we might see more people, to your earlier point, looking for perhaps a second career that have been laid off and, you know, what has been the traditional career that could be an awesome fit with a terrific amount of experience. And then also, you know, fairly low on the wage ladder because of that not having come in public education.
Well, and there's naturally variability even within the types of jobs. For example, we have our CCR, CTE positions. A lot of those come with industry experience. So they have industry experience and then come into education system. So it is either a second career or a parallel career because they're picking up a 0.2, et cetera, or a small FTE. And they may start lower, as you said, on the category. But again, it's because their eligibility to be in that role is because they have this other experience, and that's the benefit that they offer our students. I will say that there's also positions in certain departments where we'll see higher turnover, which is consistent across all schools, not unique to ours. We see higher turnover in our special education areas, both in classified and certificate, and that's not consistent. We also see people who start special education, go out to special education, and then return. So we are not unique in that. Actually, my anecdotal experience in talking to the HR executive network teams is that we retain our special education staff at a higher rate than others. We have, you know, a special education teacher who's been here for 32 years. And does great work for our kids. So that's something that we can be proud of, but it is something we have to monitor because that is a national trend and a state trend.
Just, I think overall, you know, I've never, and don't have any reason to direct principals or anyone to not hire the best person for the job at the time. We had someone last night who was only with us for 2 years and then retired. But that was the best person at the time. But back to your quick point on the negotiation piece, that's why we try to compare not just one place on a scattergram, but what does a Lake Washington have for an entry teacher, a mid teacher, and then their bottom right teachers, for that very reason, Director Lewis, because you can't just say it's there and then there's tons of variability. It's impossible to know what the different districts have, but you can clearly see across the region, some districts have put more money into the top left to try to attract teachers. Others have put all the money, as they've done percentages, into the bottom right. And so it is interesting how scattergrams have evolved across the region and where priorities have been.
Yeah, as Aaron mentioned earlier, people have kind of, I'll use the word tinkered with how fast you get to the bottom right. Is it 19? Is it 25? I think we used to be, Aaron, you'll have it. We used to be, was it 20 something?
Yeah, we were in the
Yeah.
20s when we
Yeah,
first
20
started out.
And so that recently
24,
is gonna
25,
change to 19 is to get to the bottom, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least from my perspective, this graph is very interesting and helpful and be something that I would like to see, not just for compensation, but also philosophically about what, from a high level, who we're trying to attract and who are filling the positions. Because, I mean, there's benefits to experience, there's also benefits to having younger teachers that are more perhaps open to different ideas, that don't have their own sort of philosophies. So, I mean, there's trade-offs.
Right, well, but I will say, in terms of, as you stay in a system, you continue to move down. And because we offer a fair number of clock hours that are free to our staff members, because we're always looking for professional growth with our staff members, is they move down and right. And we are not a huge system, so in order to have new inputs in, say, the lower, as you were referencing, to have new perspective, younger, I think you said younger perspective, but perspective of someone who's freshly out of college or an education institute, it does necessarily in our system typically mean someone has to go out. So you'll see less of that in times where we are making reductions. because when we have resignations, we don't necessarily backfill because we go towards those non-RIF solutions before we reduce. So just to be transparent there, because you have that, plus we don't tend to have a lot of churn.
Is there a diversity gradient, like younger staff coming in, being more diverse in like gender, race, ethnicity, et cetera?
I would not, we have had, to answer that question, we have had more diverse staff in our new staff, but I think it is not through our typical application pool. It's been through truly Rosie Burns' efforts in our alternative pathways. Our more diverse staff population tends to be in our classified unit, and we've had great success with staff who are basically learning and being supported through becoming an educator, but started out as our classified staff member. So that's where we've seen higher diversity, as I think explained in our past workforce diversification update in the state of Washington, which is really national. There's a very small percentage of those holding certificates who are people of color. And most districts are striving to have a teaching population or a staff population that as closely as possible mirrors their student population. So we're all vying for the same very 5%, 7% of the population. And we've had some success getting people of color through that have already been established, but there's just such a small end. We've had greater success increasing our diversity in our certificated workforce, I think, through our sort of grow your own alternative pathways.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think another thing that would be helpful from my perspective is for the board to have more visibility into what resignations look like year to year. I know when I came on the board, for instance, one of the theories was that perhaps compensation costs would go down because there would be a wave of retirements because of a change in benefits packages. That didn't come to be the case. But tracking resignations on a year-to-year basis, just over time to see the trend, allows us to see, like, one, the financial impact is, and as well, just what are those opportunities for diversification and bringing new people in. We need to sort of understand, are we talking 5%, 10%, what that volatility looks like? Are there long-term trends where because other sectors are depressed, and aren't doing so well that people are just staying put even longer. But I think it is for the long term from a sustainability and just to understand what our teaching pool looks like to track resignations. Not in terms on the individual basis, but in the categories, how many each year and then in what categories.
I mean, similar to what we do with students. We
Right.
track the number of students who have exited and then, backfill their.
Yeah, and as well as who's coming in and then in what categories.
So looking for trends and themes.
Trends and themes on both the resignations and new teachers and then in what quadrant.
Gotcha.
For me.
And I want to see if other people have any questions or comments, Christina and Jody and Deborah. Yeah, Deborah?
Hi, thanks. I just, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, something flashed up. I think that this models what our values are as a district in terms of veteran experienced and the expectations that our community has for our staff. I wouldn't want to see our staff digging more into reasons why why this chart is the way it is. I honestly, I care about comparing to other districts with regards to pay and other benefits and making sure that our staff is receiving, fair, comparable rates. But I think that unless the values of our district change, I wouldn't want to see staff spending much time into looking into why. Of course, I want exit interviews and knowing if there's problems within the system, and that's why people are leaving. But I value our experienced teachers. Just for an example, when my daughter went through elementary school at Island Park, all but one of her well, actually all but two of her teachers were veteran, like very, very veteran teachers. And we benefited greatly from that. I appreciate new experience and excitement and all that. And I think that there can be a mix, but overall, I think the philosophy of hiring the best person in the moment for the job that's open is the best values that we can, and along with valuing who we have and retaining are the best values that we can have.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a balance that you strike, you know, and we kind of trust you guys to strike that balance. I attended a middle school that, due to budget constraints, only hired fresh teachers right out of college with zero experience. And in 7th grade, I had 3 different math teachers. There was so much turnover. They had no support and no preparation. And all my other teachers were also first-year teachers. And I basically learned nothing in 7th grade. And I left the school at the end of the year because it was such a bad experience, right? So that's like one extreme. And then another extreme is we have all these like super amazing teachers who've been here for decades, but like we're having a hard time affording them, right? And we're having to make cuts in other areas that are also, you know, detrimental to our students, right? So there's got to be some sort of like happy medium in there. And it sounds like you guys are striking that happy medium. Yeah.
And I can tell you that, like, right now, our elementary principals are trying to fill a couple open positions, and there's, I think, around 90 applicants right now that they're weeding through, trying to figure out. And they do look for balance in their staff, not only as a district, but also in their own buildings, to try to get that blend of new ideas versus experience. And so it is definitely something, and I can speak to that as a principal, that you do look at, is that mix too. But ultimately, as they're looking through those 90 applicants, trying to figure out the best person, irregardless of this stuff, because that's what we all want to see in front of our kids.
And I think the support kind of goes both ways, like younger teachers, newer teachers kind of learn from more experienced teachers, but also younger, newer teachers may have a facility with, you know, technology, for example, that their older peers don't have, and so they can kind of support each other. Did you want to say something?
I think that all of you have made the points that I agree with. I will just comment that looking at this graph also, I can see that the staff is happy here, and that also translates on the social emotional portion of our students. That is part of the impact too. So that matters. And a medium balance is perfect. I think that you teachers will benefit of the experience and the mentorship of others, and then the other way around. So it's pretty much zero, but noticing that I love that teachers are happy right here. So.
As we wrap up.
Well, we have one more set of data to share. This was just part of what we were asked
Perfect.
for. But we will get this to you. We just wanted to make sure we have it all accurate and ready to go. The second tab, and Andrews, you can like highlight the bottom right of those cells there. I think it would be like P and Q 17, kind of there. The second thing you asked us about was kind of what's the relationship between head count of staff and FTE of staff. And so we'll give this to you as well, but the bottom right two cells, 17 on row 17, we have 279 head count. We have 279 certificated staff, and that all those equal 260 FTE. So it's about 90. I think it's 93% of our staff averages 93% of their of working a full-time job. So there's not a huge range. We don't have tons of part-time staff, but there are some, and we do have to pay benefits on most of those. There are a couple that our FTE is low enough that we do not pay benefits for those, but it's not a huge deal. But I think we appreciated this bringing to our attention because it did spur some conversations with us in the HR department around kind of some of the challenges and things that might impact the budget that are kind of the hidden things that are unexpected a lot, and that these two, Angela on the certificated lens and Kathleen on the classified lens, really have an insight to, and that's why we want to bring them here to share. Kind of, although we don't feel that part-time necessarily impacts the budget a lot, There are some, like I said, there is some SEB issues, but there are other unexpected things that do come up that we just wanted to kind of lift the veil for you guys of the challenges that happen along the way. So Angela, do you want to talk about certificate?
Yeah, so I think for the certificated employees, there's two things, and one of them that's really hard to predict is the leave of absences. Back in 2020, we added PFML in the state of Washington, which now has a compensation component to it. So before that, scheduling and elective surgery and whatnot, people were looking to those summers and breaks when students weren't here, trying to minimize financial impact, preserve sick leave balances, things like that. And with the addition of PFML, which has that paid component, it's really made it a lot more, I'm even gonna use the word lucrative, to take a leave during the school year because you're getting your salary, you have access to your sick leave, and now the state of Washington is additionally compensating you. So that's a really unpredictable thing. We have no idea who's gonna need that knee replacement or other things. You know, the parental leaves, that's always, what do I wanna say, like a volatile thing, trying to track which year you're gonna have how many parental leaves and things like that. But we are seeing an uptick in choosing to do some elective leave options because the compensation is there for them. So that's one that's hard to predict and anticipate in the budget.
Can I add on to that?
Yes,
Before
please.
gathering your thoughts? I think an example might be there was one position this year, the one spot in one school, one grade, that we had to pay, I think, 3 people benefits for in that position.
Yeah, I don't know if we hit 3, I think we hit 2 on
Definitely
benefits,
2.
but 3, that 1.0 position ended up costing like more like a 1.5, right? Because that original, the person who originally held the position is still in a paid status because they have all these protections for them. And we want that for our staff. But meanwhile, we have students in seats that need an educator. So we're also compensating another person, and then due to some very unfortunate circumstances, we had to replace that person with another person. And so just, you know, these 1.0 positions that we're budgeting for, a lead can quickly change that to a 1.2 and beyond. And then the SEB piece becomes a factor. If it's an early in the year leave, it can lead to basically a double dip in SEB benefits. And as we know, SEB benefits are incredibly costly.
Did you have anything else?
That's basically my part too. So
Okay.
yeah, we're good.
Kathleen, what about classified?
Were there any questions based on that? I just see one of the little cards.
Well, I just had a question about the classified numbers, so.
Perfect. And this is just they need that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what was your question?
Oh, I just wanted to know how the numbers compared for classified, since this is just for
Yeah,
certificate.
in classified, there's so many different types of positions that fall underneath that classified umbrella. We have, you know, your paraeducators, that makes up a large part of our classified staff, but we have bus drivers, nurses, facilities people. So it really does vary as far as experience. For instance, our facilities staff, our crew over there, very experienced people over there. They're mostly 15 and 20-year employees, but a lot of our paraeducators are just coming in brand new. So it really does vary by position. With the classified, it's not so much where usually when I'm doing a scattergram, I'm almost doing it by position, just so we can look at those variances across the different jobs.
And when do benefits kick in, for how many hours?
After 630 hours, then you get access to STEP benefits, which is an average cost, I believe, was roughly $15,000. And
So
what is that?
Kathleen, 630 hours is how much per day?
So typically school year, it's around 3.5 hours a day. We have classified staff who are on a variety of different calendars, so not just school year calendars. We have people like our in our offices that are working over 200 days per year. So they have a lesser amount of hours to reach the 630 threshold.
And is that a contractual MIE or is that a state requirement?
State. Yeah. Yeah, and back specifically with classified, and as Angela was speaking about with the leaves, you know, there were FMLA protections before the Washington Paid Family Leave came into play a few years ago. But just because we do have a number of classified staff who work lesser hours, many of them didn't work the required number of hours to get FMLA. So when they did go out on leave, their benefits would stop and we wouldn't have to keep paying those amounts. Whereas now with SEB, it's so much lower, the threshold to receive that, that we're continuing benefits for all of these people. And so we're at the new Washington paid family leave, as Angela was saying, we have many more people who are going out in the middle of the year. We're backfilling those people, and then we're having to kind of almost double up on benefits many times. And so it gets very costly, but our hands are a little bit tied with that because all of these are state programs, we have to follow them, and
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges as I put on my principal hat is, one of the solutions could be that we make sure all of our paras work full days versus 3.5 hours where they'd be benefit eligible. The challenge with that is, that doesn't necessarily always match the kid needs.
Yeah.
So kids might need we might need somebody just coming in the morning to meet the needs of a certain student or a certain set of classes at the middle or high school, or the afternoon or midday. So it's not as simple as let's just have fewer people, but more hours to reduce the SEM impact of that. So we have looked into that. I can say at IMS, but it's not a perfect fit on that.
That's great. We're a little behind on the schedule, so if there's nothing else, then we should.
And we'll get this data to you as well.
Just quickly, Angela and Kathleen, just want to introduce yourselves and a little bit more. You don't get to see the board very often, so I don't get to see
I walk
you.
by your pictures in the hall
Yeah.
every morning. I say good morning.
Try to match them.
No handover hurts. You're glamour shots on the wall. So my name's Angela Zwiefelhofer, and I've been in education for this is my 14th year. So I come to Mercer Island with 13 years experience at Snoqualmie Valley School District, and then I've been here for the last 2 years. So, and then as mentioned, I predominantly take care of certificated staff, and Kathleen does classified, but there's a crossover, which is, kind of magical.
And I'm Kathleen Long. I've been at Mercer Island, I think this is the end of my 13th year. And then prior to that, I was in Renton School District for almost 20 years. So I began in education when I was about 5 years old. But no, been at Mercer Island, love it. And yeah, work primarily with our classified staff, but we're always cross-training so we can support each other. So
That's great. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for bringing this.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
We'll swap out our facilities operations and finance team. So come on up. Come on up. Good try.
Our next item is OE11, Facilities and Capital Assets School Funding.
Come on up. Deborah, in the agenda today, under 1C, there's a link that has all of the different documents. Some of them were too large to put up into Word docs, and so I just left them all in a folder for now, and we'll put them up later. Andrea will also share, but I did printouts for those who were here, but I wanted to make sure you had them as well.
Thank you.
Yep. The next two items, they'll probably, they might kind of go in and out a little bit of one another, but this is really the next or the first opportunity post the bond failure for you as a board to have a conversation. And we've been listening closely over the last couple meetings or in conversations with you about, some of the documents that we think would be helpful for the next conversation. So in your set of materials today, just to kind of orient you, we kind of have a long-range facility recap, which is this PowerPoint presentation has 2 slides on each one. And we can also go to the website if we need to. We also have an election schedule, and that looks like this right here, that you have to be able to look at, what are the upcoming elections, and there's some other data in there. Then we also have a Cap Tech Levy 1-pager that we haven't passed out yet, but when we get to that agenda, we can give you that. Matt's put together kind of some costs as well as, what would the cost be? And that's not a handout, but he'll talk about that to the extent you need that. How much does it cost to run a bond? Some of you had asked questions around what do we think construction might look like in the future? And so Brandy will be prepared to speak to that as well. Then we have brought back this document here to kind of reorient us if you want to start having conversations about what would different bond configurations be. And then on the back side of that sheet is this piece of paper, which also gives you an idea of, you know, what we're going back to that LRFP. Deborah and Dan will remember this one, of the different proposals that were out there. You also wanted some information on non-voted debt, and that's the one titled Foster Garvey. And so Matt has worked with our partners with Foster Garvey to provide you information to have a conversation there. And then lastly, I'll be prepared to talk about community and voter surveys and information we found out from 3 different partners that we've reached out to gather information. So we can go through these and walk you through them, or you can reference them. We're really here to help facilitate your conversation and provide you our best advice.
I would love if you could walk us through them, but just the kind of like 30,000 foot view, like just
Great.
an overview.
Okay.
Not every.
Let's start with the PowerPoint on the long range facility plan then. So these slides are going to seem familiar, more familiar for 3 of you, and I think Jody and Christina. These were ones that were really kind of pre your time on the board, but you might have seen some of these as well. And so Brandy, jump in as you see fit as we go through as well. If we just a quick recap of our long range facility process there.
Let's share that really quick.
Okay. Yep, keep going. There we go. You can keep going. Oh, this is a little fancy piece there. No, one more. Yeah, sorry. So this was just a reminder of kind of the long-range facility plan process that took us up really to the bond. And so this was just all of the different things that took place between really going back to, you know, the demographic studies that we did clear back in the fall of 22, and then set us on that direction. You can see all the different points along the way where the long range facility plan committee was meeting, and then that really set up to make sure that this was the direction you wanted to go. So the next series of slides are really for information only, really reference back, really setting what were the vision, the goals, the program needs that we started seeing. These first ones were actually from the 2019 group and an affirmation of those. We then took a look at the middle school program. You can go one more. What were the middle school program needs? And that's how we came up with that project. Then we took a look at the high school program needs. We then went out into the community and took a look at what were some of the community perceptions. And so we have the dates where we were out there. That's also where we were having conversations around consolidation and meeting with the community, getting a sense both of what were perceptions of a bond and the perceptions of potentially closing one of our elementary schools. We then went back, as you recall, to the Long Range Facility Planning Committee, and that's really where it came out with no elementary consolidation, continue with capital projects for the 3-year plan that we'll talk about today, and then the potential bond measure as it would move forward, and that's where we came up with the focus on the high school, and then finish the middle school concepts with all of the must-dos and some of the accessibility of some of our facilities. So then we had our pre-bond schedule and costing. So I put at the bottom here just to remind us of where we were in time. This was January 2024 is when we had this board update. And this is where we were looking for direction from you as a board for architect selection and then design work, drawings last summer, coming back with cost estimations, finalizing the options so that we could come to you in November with numbers that you would feel confident in considering a resolution. And then you went ahead and passed the bond resolution. And then that put us into the process of this past spring. We then also have talked over time, if we go one more, Andrews, to the age of facilities. And the ages have changed slightly because these were, I believe, up through 2024 is when we did these. So you have to add a year. But this gave the community and you just an insight into all the green was from construction. And if you get to blue, that's where there was a major remodel, just reminding folks on that. So then on the next one, we took a look at capacity and projected enrollment and what capacity could look like. Again, these are slightly outdated. This goes back to kind of the 20 numbers from 23, 24 projecting out to 2032 based on the demographic studies. And so these were projections there. The next one there then is also blown up for you. Thought that you might want to see it in a little larger print, and that is, you know, what were some of the scenarios that seem to be where the committee was leaning and making considerations, and ultimately landing on scenario C for that project. The 144.5 million, as a reminder, that didn't include some of the mass timber and some of the other priorities that you had as a board. And so that's how that number then escalated up, as I recall. Is that right, Brandy? We did some of those. And then lastly, we wanted to remind you about the hypothetical bonds. So this was hypothetical bond scenario 1 that we were talking to the community and you about. And this was ultimately the path that we went on. Obviously, unfortunately, in February 2025, rather than a approval, we had a disapproval on the vote. And so that work that would have been between now and 2028 is what we're trying to figure out of what would be next. We did throw out another hypothetical, which is the next slide. And this is, again, hypothetical, but we did offer this as an option as well, where a potential February 2027 bond could take place. And then you can kind of see what would happen after that. So that's this document. So why don't we talk about this document? It might lead us to some of the others, and then we can walk through these as well, but let's start with this. Brandy, you want to add anything else contextually or Matt? Okay.
I guess I'd like to hear about some of these like other funding options, like the non-voted debt, et cetera, just to kind of, so we all have the same vocabulary and understanding of those
Why don't I
things.
kick it over to you for that one? That's the Foster Garvey handout. That one I don't think I have uploaded for you, Deborah, so we'll pull that one up. I don't think I have it in there. We'll send it to you, Deborah, and follow up. Go ahead.
It's in that folder.
It is.
Oh, it wasn't sent out.
Which one is it? Do you know what?
Oh, is it the,
The LGO bond
Yeah.
overview?
Right.
yep,
Is that it?
thank you.
That was a good guess.
So in regard to Director Lois's comments and questions, I worked with Lee Marquisio, our bond counsel at Foster Garvey. He provided that. It's about a 3-pager, kind of a 101 on non-voted limited general obligation or LGO bond and debt and how that operates. In very remedial summary, it's the ability for us, to you as a board, specifically to vote to bond ourselves if you take a loan. There's a limit of non-voted statutory capacity that we have. It's based on the calculation, and right there on the front page, right there, it's a debt limits. It's 3/8 of 1% of the value of taxable property within the school district. I spoke with Piper Sandler also to get our most current limit. It's based on our current assessed valuation and multiplied by that 0.00375%, and currently about 79 million available to us in capacity that we could bond ourselves. The problem lies in how we pay for that. This does not give itself to creating more taxes, if you will. There's no dedicated revenue stream on that side. We would have to pay for this via the general fund, period. So therein lies the rub with those bonds.
And that's different from cities in what way? Because I know
Not
that
necessarily
we,
different cities, but case in point, let's take the city of Mercer Island with most recent 29 million. They have what you call an enterprise fund, or their water, wastewater fees and rates, whatnot. So they increased that rate by 8% year over year to help pay for that $29 million non-voted bond. So they have a revenue stream that pays for that. We don't per se, there's nothing dedicated. We would have to look at ways to pay for that out of the general fund.
Thank you. And then also the question of splitting up a bond into chunks or projects into
Sure.
chunks.
yep. The best document to look at that would probably be this document here. Yep, right there.
So I actually just a few quick questions. I mean, so I guess thinking it through in terms of any major capital projects, you'd probably be limited. But if you had an emergency situation, you could, and then you would do an interfund transfer. I mean, like, and just mechanically in terms of raising money in order to, like, let's say, pay for an HVAC system. It could be done through the non-voted debt.
Yeah, for me, I
And then with an
consider
interfund
that
transfer.
in case of emergency break glass fund, this is where it would come into play. It specifically, we discussed the HVAC at the high school. If it were to have a massive failure, here's an opportunity for us to tap into this and pay for that. Once again, we have to find the revenue to pay for it, but yes, there's an opportunity.
I will say that I am happy to know that there's a way, if there's an emergency. I also see the age of the infrastructure that we have, and emergency can happen in more than one building at the same time, or if there's like an earthquake or something. So saying that, and I would say not emergency, but yes, the age of the infrastructure. That will deplete our general fund or
cap tax, right? We use cap tax.
Correct, you can.
whatever. I think that it is by being updating our facilities, we have less risk of getting to those emergencies. Just thinking one of the other pieces, yes.
So how would, so if we needed to do this sort of like emergency fund, whatever, like for our HVAC system, then how does that sort of affect our general savings and credit and whatever? And I'm thinking along the lines of how we are still in this like long-term project to repay the general fund.
The fund balance.
Fund balance, thank you.
Go back up, correct.
Yeah, so that would just be sort of added on to that task then, in that case?
Before you
No
answer,
taxes would be created. We'd have to find a way within our current, whether it be cap tech, EP&O levy, et cetera, general fund apportionment from the state to pay for this bond.
Yeah, so it seems like from what I'm hearing is, general concern, or concern from some quarters about like the general fund and how fast it's getting paid back and the effect it has on
fund balance.
fund balance, thank you.
Sorry, I just want Deborah to know that we see her. So
Yeah.
we'll have to call her.
And I'm wondering if this would sort of raise additional concerns. It's a source of ready money if we need it in an emergency, but would it raise sort of like additional concerns or like payment rehassles or something, or am I completely looking at it wrong?
No, I don't think so. I think I don't necessarily speak for Moody's. That said, it probably would raise additional concerns because there's no dedicated stream of revenue. We have to look at how do we pay for this. I mean, quite frankly, we'd probably look at additional cuts to do so. And that is not always a positive in the eyes of Moody's and our rating agencies.
Deborah,
Thank you. I appreciate the question and getting the information. I think it's vital that we explore all of our options. I think if we continue now learning that we would have to pay it back via the general fund, I think making sure that this statement is very clear that frankly it's an irresponsible option for our school district to rely on, that as we move forward and make decisions, the collective we, because it won't be me, with regards to bonds in the future, that this is not a responsible, viable option. Number one, in my opinion, it's very much non-democratic that the school would, because we can't get the voters to pay for something responsible, that to me, this is just the epitome of irresponsibility and paying. I think the city fell into that with the last 10, 20 years, people not willing to pay for infrastructure and following the tax structures that we have in this state. I think any sort of narrative from the board that this is a viable option, it's very detrimental and irresponsible. So, like I said, I very much appreciate the questions being asked and the information being gathered about it, but learning that it can't be a loan, quote unquote loan. It's frustrating that we can't get the same type of loan like the city did in an emergency, but knowing that we can't, I think that needs to be the narrative, that it's very clear that it's an irresponsible way. To even in an emergency, if an HVAC system goes down, even if we have to pay $5 million, I don't know where that would come from without. Anyways, it's just, I think the narrative needs to be very clear, unless if the opinion is that this is not a good way to function, because we can't raise money in a responsible way, that needs to be the narrative, and it cannot be used in the future as an excuse not to pass a bond to do the work that we know we responsibly need to do.
Dan.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I think that if an emergency situation were to happen, to be paid out of the cap tech until the cap tech, I don't think it would be like the general fund. I think it would be cap tech. That's natural. It's just like there wouldn't be, by definition, enough money in the cap tech immediately to pay for it, which would be the reason for exploring what that would look like to borrow it. And then I would assume it would be paid off over time in the cap tech, which would then be replenished whenever that cap tech levy came up for a vote.
We're not talking about $500,000. We're talking about $20 to $30 million, and the cap tech fund can't function. We don't have that. And when the cap tech levy only comes up for vote, sure, we can raise it astronomically the next time it comes up in 2.5 years, but it's only every 6 years. We can't just go out and get more money. And then we need to be very clear on what we're taking away from. The cap tech is what we use for the maintenance of our buildings, not for new infrastructure that we need in order to maintain. So my point is yes, there's an emergency function so that our kids can still go to school, but because it can't be a loan and we have to take it from money that we already have, that's just it's basically saying it's a tremendously irresponsible way to do it. We don't get to benefit like the city did with the sewer. They could spend in a less responsible way, and someone probably foresee the sewer issues, but we know now that we can't rely on that. And yeah, it's going to keep kids in school for 6 months so that we can repair an HVAC system. It is tremendously irresponsible, and it's going to lead to devastating consequences if we do that.
So I don't want to go down a rat hole with this because there's a whole bunch more we need to talk about, but it's good to know about this option in case of emergency, but I think in case of the kind of massive emergency that Christina was referencing, like a God forbid an earthquake kind of situation, there would be so much else going on. There might be other sources of funding. Who knows what would be happening on Mercer Island in that scenario. So Jody, and then can we move on to the next?
Yeah, we can totally move on.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that the thing that this brings to my attention, and I think the benefit of having this discussion for me, is that we will remember that we have that education piece to do.
when we go out for another levy, and to say like, you know, the city had this financial option available to them, we do not have the income streams the city had to, you know, to make this a viable option for us to take on, this part of that. If that's, you know, if we feel like that's the case, just so that we have, you know, it's because it's something that seems on the face like it's something that could happen, and, you know, that might work, but if you think about, like, we don't have the same funding availability the city does, that's good to know, and I think it would be good for our community to know when the time comes. But
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Just on the, you know, some of these projects, even on a fund balance side, we would never have enough in a fund balance to be able to take care of some of these issues. You know, we'd be way north of the 8 to 10% on that. I agree with where you're all headed, and that is, it is nice to know what tools we have. And, you know, that's, you know, what the finance team has continued to try to make sure that, you know, we were looking at all kinds of different things. I think if we just narrow down just for a second on the HVAC kind of component of that, you know, if we do have catastrophic failure, let's say on the HVAC at the high school, you know, I think what this project would have done, and Brandy and Tony, you can talk a little bit more, is, you know, this is about trying to change the entire infrastructure, everything in the ceilings, everything, so that when you put in new mechanical, it's functioning at a much better rate, everything is balanced. You know, catastrophic failure is fixed with what, you know, that main thing that failed. Unfortunately though, everything else, you might lose out on a lot of efficiencies.
I think that's very, very important to bring up. You know, the entire HVAC system is not gonna just fall out of the ceiling in every fan unit. Yeah, exactly, thank you, Jim. You know, but even our control system is broke down into zones, right? And we've had to do some emergency work just within zones. I'm not saying at some point the backbone doesn't break, right? There's always gonna be some sort of a weird catastrophic thing, but for the most part, I think Fred is right, spot on. We're not looking at a $22 million bill. We're looking at a portion of that, whatever that might be at the time.
Just need you and a roll of duct tape, right?
A little baby wire is always
Yeah.
helpful also.
Really big roll of duct tape, yeah.
So I think your question was kind of, you know, what does it start to look like if you start, you know, parsing out different pieces and what that could look like there. Probably kick it over to Brandy and Tony to talk about what that might kind of look like in terms of what would even make sense or what would be a possibility on that, so.
I think certainly the two components of the IMS project could be split. You could do the very basic project that escalated, and again, this would have to be escalated further, right? Because construction would now be pushed out depending on when a bond was rerun. But you could certainly split the IMS and then the multipurpose and sustainability apart. I think the two high school components, you could split out the HVAC and fire alarm and do that as a standalone, but if you're going to do the improvements at the high school, you also need to add those must-dos, and we can't make all those improvements at the high school without the mechanical and electrical component to it. And then I think the others are all a la carte.
And in terms of like, what's the, you know, I know when you borrow money for a house, for example, like there's a certain cost associated with that. Like, are we gonna be paying like double the amount of, say, fees if we split into like middle school versus high school projects? You know, like, is there?
I don't think so. I think most of that stuff is a percentage. I mean, and they're large enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Matt, just, you have the numbers, you've been doing some work on this. When we go out to run a bond, if we've done all of this legwork that we've gone through to get to here, but we have to pay all the fees for Foster Garvey and King County and all of that, what is running an election cost?
The estimate we've gotten, have not got the invoice back from King County for the past election. We ran the bond on about $45,000 at that point. It's all dependent upon how many agencies have items on the ballot, et cetera. More means less to us, if that makes sense.
Sure. And then I would also be interested if we're when we're looking at breaking down bonds into component parts, if that's something that we're looking at, or if we're asking you to run the numbers on, I'd be interested to see like what that costs us also, you know, the sort of philosophy of like, I have to redo 3 bathrooms in my house, but I want to do them one at a time, so I always have a bathroom, you know, kind of philosophy of construction, or versus like I'm doing all my bathrooms at once and it's inconvenient, but I get them all done.
Or does
that
it,
make sense? That's not a
or
good
does it
analogy,
not
but-
matter because
Or does
they're
it not
different
matter?
physical sites, you know what I
Right,
mean?
but I mean, like, but yeah, so like, is there like a cost of like, okay, yeah, we did this part of the school, or we did this, but initially we thought we would do all of this at once and it would cost X, and now it's gonna cost X plus, you know, 1/3 X or something, I don't know. That's just something to think about.
I don't think on the IMS project that it changes the base cost of that project. Certainly, if you want to add the multipurpose room later, it's a lot more expensive to add that multipurpose room in a future bond than it would have been here. There are things like mass timber, you know, that you can't go back and redo. So if you want to include it, then you have to include that now. But, and again, I think the 2 high schools are tied together. You could do mechanical and electrical separate, but you have to do those together. And they're independent and would run at the same time, so I don't think it changes the base cost.
Yeah, Dan. Oh, sorry, wait, Deborah was first. Deborah and then Dan.
Just quick clarifying question. Did Matt say 45,000 or 425?
45.
45
Yeah.
for to have it on the ballot once.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank
Or
you.
less than 1/20th of the cost of the architectural firm. Okay. Question about the levy schedule. So are we gonna get to that, or am I jumping?
We can jump to election dates.
We can
That might be a
talk
good
about
I'd like to
time.
hear more about it.
Yeah, is there anything else in that?
I think, you know, and I think this is a logical place to go next, and then I can also maybe follow with what I've learned from some entities who do the work around surveys of community and whatnot, but I'll kick it over, Matt, to you to talk a little bit about election dates
It's
and
the 4th one down. It's really teeny, my eyes are old. There it is.
Yeah.
You can blow that up a little bit. And- Okay, this was provided to you, Piper Sandler provided a schedule, which has been actually quite useful for me in regard to this whole process. This was given to us, I think, in October of last year, so it's still applicable, but obviously the highlighted area is the bond that we just ran and did not pass. But looking forward, there's a couple of dates I want to bring to your attention. One is that February 10th, 2026. That is the potential target date for renewal of our EP&O levy. And then beyond that is a date that's not on there, but at the bottom, if there were to be there, it would be the February 8th, 2028, which would be potential renewal of the Cap Tech levy.
Quick question on the levy. Like, my understanding, and this could be incorrect, but we can't put in place a new levy until the old one expires. But that we can run a replacement levy at any time in advance. So in terms of, I guess this is the thought, right? If you
know, correct?
I'm talking about Cap Tech is what I'm curious
We
about.
can run multiple Cap Tech levies on top of each other.
Oh, we can run
Yeah,
Cap Tech on
yes.
top of each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
on what you have seen, because actually that's jarring my thought on something. What you have seen from some school districts is instead of running the full, let's say 4 years of an EP&O levy, they may only run it for 2 and then they recycle back up. I think that there were some districts that were doing it. I think that's hard on voters. That's hard on, the whole process there. But yeah, the EP&O and CapTech are a little bit different.
Do we know yet what the city's plans are in terms of their own,
In Commerce,
building? Yeah.
so I know that the city manager and the mayor were at Rotary a couple weeks ago to present on their potential project or proposed project. And then the deputy mayor is going to be with the PTA council next week preparing the same presentation. And I believe it's a November this November is what I understand it to be.
So just to put a pin in it, for the cap tech, like if we decided to run the next election cycle, I'm just hypothetically, like a cap tech levy, we could. And the only sort of limitation on a debt perspective is that it has to be retired within 6 years of issuance, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But we can't use the cap tech levy for this type of project.
Yeah, okay.
We can.
For this
Yeah, I
scale
mean-
of
The
project?
challenge with the cap tech levy is that you collect an equal amount over that 4 year or 6 years.
6 years, I mean, would be the
Right.
longest.
So if you need to do $10 million worth of work, but you're collecting $5 million a year, you have to wait until the second year.
And EPO,
Before,
EPO doesn't have that limitation?
a bond does not have that
Oh, yeah,
limitation,
correct.
right? But
Because you get the money out.
Although you could do it in conjunction with an unsecured debt paid off by the EP&O levy, right? For like the upfront portion. I understand like the timing, and I've seen that other districts, like
Could.
the one in Everett, I mean, like maybe there's like some financing costs, but I mean, like you could. I mean, in terms of like a bridge loan, as you're waiting that cap tech money to pay it off.
You could do that, yes.
Thank you.
Matt, did you get any feedback from Piper Sandler about how well those kinds of bonds sell?
You mean the non-voted?
The non-voted?
Yeah, they require, guaranteed of established revenue stream. The term they used, Piper Sandler, was it would go to a committee to see if we had that ability, could we repay over a 15, 20-year period? And what would that look like? The fear is that, and it's their comments, not mine, that we would not be able to secure funding for that.
But if you had the cap tech levy that was
We have to
passed,
prove that we had that
Yeah,
and.
that would be-
I mean, that would be,
Right.
it's passed. but-
Can we hear about, like, community survey stuff next before we have more of a full discussion?
Sure. That one should be simple, actually.
Was there more on what
What it is.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Was there more on the levy schedule that you wanted to go through?
No,
I figured we
just
should come
it's
back
in
to
front of
that.
you, you see it just, now, and those February 26th and February 28th, those are projected deadlines, targets for the cap, or EP&O first and the cap tech renewal.
So- No problem. Great. Let me go right into the next slide. So, reached out to WASA, reached out through WASBO for Matt there, and then Brandy through connections in her world around, who's doing this work. When you fail a bond, who's doing the work to help come in and see what's going on. The company that has probably the largest presence in the Puget Sound region, and to some degree across the state. They're not in Washington only, they're actually all over, but it's Strategies 360. You had also mentioned the Tradition Search Partners. That was the person who conducted, Lydia Musher, who conducted the superintendent search. And then Hanover Research is a third one that WASA said to kind of take a look at. So these are the three I looked at. The Hanover piece, they're a national organization. They mainly do work less in this space. They're just getting into it a little bit, but they've done more of just educational research. So this would be kind of a new space for them. When I talked to Lydia at great length and talked a little bit more, her wheelhouse might be more in the focus group kind of conversations and not as much into election analysis and voter and demographic analysis. Those are things that hasn't been as much of her expertise. And so Strategies 360 was the one who probably had the most comprehensive overview. Doesn't mean that we are set to go with them, but I did want to give you some of the language and ideas that they provided. So if we take a look at this, the approach that Strategies 360, and there's a couple others, there's the Elway group, but they're not taking new clients right now. And so there are a couple other firms that kind of go in this direction. But there's 4 broad aspects to the work that they do. One is a qualitative research with focus groups, doing some, different probing and trying to figure out, what's kind of happening or what happened in a community. The next one is that quantitative research, really looking at a survey that represents the community to try to gain a better perspective of the voters. They do work both before bonds and after, so you'll see some of this language might seem like they're talking about before you would put out a bond, but they do both of those. The next one is the quantitative retrospective analysis. That's much more about what we want them to do. What did the voter trends look like, and what were reasons why people said yes? What were reasons why people said no? And what would be reasons that people would change their vote if you did different things? And then the last one is the qualitative focus group retrospective from there. So if we look at the next slide, if I think about what my recommendation would be, and kind of looking for direction, I definitely think a representative community survey would be important for across our entire community. We have lots of great reach into the people who are already affiliated with schools, but we would need a survey that would need to be obviously with those who aren't necessarily in our or on our mailing lists or as tuned in. I also think it would be important to run it with an outside firm. I didn't say that at the beginning just because of transparency. I think it builds goodwill around it's not us doing it, that it's someone else. So the second thing I'd recommend is a demographic and election analysis. That's really taking a look at what actually happened and getting all of the records out of King County elections and whatnot. And then lastly, taking a look at our bond communication, how we communicated about the bond, both in terms of written pieces that we provided as well as the presentations that we delivered. So those would be a direction that I would recommend that we head as a school district to try to get a better sense. I think it would help to determine what are some of your immediate next steps, breaking things into smaller pieces, starting all the way over again on the long-range facility plan, but I think data will be important in this.
Do we have any sense of how much this would cost, this type of analysis?
Those 3 things together would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 to do all of that work.
So for this, for me, I think the cost is very reasonable. I mean, same with demographic studies. I think it's, in the scheme of things, relatively a drop in the bucket. I mean, given the magnitude of the projects. So to that, I think all of it is important. I think the community survey in particular is important. Me individually would like to see it very broad, including, mailers to every, the 10,000 mailing addresses that we're trying to get everyone, not just those that are on our email list. And survey questions are extraordinarily important, what's on the question and how they're asked. So my expectation would be that the board, have the opportunity to see what those questions are before they go out, particularly if it's not just a representative, but a broad-based community survey.
Sorry, Jody.
Just to add on a little bit to what Dan was saying, I think that your assessment that this needs to be an outside firm is spot on. I think it'll provide access to the community that we don't always reach as a school system. And I think it's vitally important that, now we'll have the experts crafting the questions. I think that it is vitally important what questions get asked, and I'd like to see the professionals do it, rather than have us just imagine what the best questions would be to get to the information that we want. And, just as it's easier to make that 10th pancake than the first one, I think it's good to have someone who's done this before do it again, so, and lend their expertise to our issue.
And I think it's important to get started on it ASAP.
Yeah.
It's fresh in people's minds why they chose to vote or not vote the way they did. You kind of want to strike while the iron is
The
hot.
next slide, if you go to that, Andrews kind of lays out a potential timeline of what this would look like. I did ask,
I see you, Deborah.
I asked Strategies 360 in particular, who does a lot of this, what's the urgency or not urgency on a timeline? They seem to think that, you know, the demographic and election analysis, that doesn't require reaching out to people, that they can start working on. Taking a look at our communication assessment, they've got all that data.
Can you just explain a little bit more what, it's a little less obvious to me what the bond communication assessment piece is?
Yeah, it takes a look at it from a district perspective, kind of going all the way back to when we were having, you know, when we were out doing long range facility planning. We did that Qualtrics survey to gather input. And then once we had this, you know, they take a look at things like this, that we were presenting, that were all the factual stuff that we did. They're not looking at either the pro or the con, and they're not weighing in on those folks. It's really just, what was the voter, you know, we had that one voter opportunity with our mailer. They do an analysis of that. And so it's really just looking at, how did we present information? Did we present it in a way that was maybe not understood by people or not? So it's not trying to, you know, they were very clear with me. They understand the fine line of the PDC. And so it's not trying to cross that line.
Deborah?
Thank you. So that's, my question is sort of related. How would this be different from, I feel like we did so much prep work, community engagement, mail-em, did focus groups. You know, people chose or chose not to attend and participate, but community members were certainly a part of things, and not necessarily school related community members, but there was broad outreach that was largely, I don't want to say ignored, but that outside non-participatory in the schools, community members chose not to participate in for whatever reason. And then we heard a lot of the arguments that would have been great to hear at the time of the decision making. So I guess I'm wondering, how is this different now? How would this engagement be different than what we already did? And in terms of, what do we hope to learn more that would actually be able to change the outcome with our world the way it is right now, in terms of the divide and the anti-tax and people that are just never going to vote for any tax, period. I mean, this is a lot of money to me. And when we add on this fee and the cost of going for another bond, you know, that's like 10% of the bond. And then we keep doing this. And then, you know, we had so much criticism about all the prep work that we did. And I shouldn't say the criticism of the cost of the prep work. Like, I guess I'm still frustrated from how this bond went, because I think this was a phenomenal plan with community engagement, engaged by the experts in our community, and then to start from zero, and then we're going to have people, frankly, making stuff up again, and playing ignorant. And I'm not talking about valid arguments. I get that there's a huge financial impact to people with taxes. I'm not including that in my concern. I'm including in my concern this small group of people that were saying, but we need to do elementary schools. Well, we had community members in a facilities group that dug deep into the conditions and the enrollment and all those things. And now we actually also have a lot more understanding in our school community, parent community, about why the facilities committee recommended consolidating an elementary school in terms of the costs, when we're looking at when we're looking at the cuts with nurses and librarians and the impact, the financial impact across the board of having 4 elementary schools. And so anyways, I guess I'm gravely concerned by the cost of this, and want to know what different answers we're expecting to get than we just got in our bond vote. And while we have a 60% pass, I'm wondering whether or not we frankly waste our time and money. So I'm trying not to be the sky is falling, but I want to know what we're expecting to see different from this type of analysis than what we did in the last 6 years in terms of preparation for this bond.
I'm gonna just jump the queue here because my thing is only 1 sentence long. I would hope personally to see from these results, for example, whether the size of the bond was a major factor for a lot of people in their vote, like among the no voters, because if we had that information, we might in fact choose to split our next bond proposal into, 2 chunks and like let people vote separately on them, or 1 chunk at a time, So to me, that would be some of the most useful information. And then we're gonna go in order here, so it's, yeah, sorry. Christina, go ahead.
And it's fine, I think that, well, I'm speaking.
It's okay.
I also would like to hear the answer to that question from the district.
Fine, okay,
Or
so
giving an
Fred,
opinion of
and then Dan,
what
and
they
then
think
Christina, and then Jody.
about it. Yes.
And welcome the team as
Yeah.
well. You know what, I don't want to oversimplify how election results happen. But if I just kind of think about, even at our peak in last levy, we had about 72% support for that levy. So let's call that 70%. So even 30% of our voters weren't even in favor of the last levies. That means we only have 10% that we can lose and still pass a bond. And, we lost, 13 or 14%. And so I would want to know, what were those reasons that people chose, made a choice not to support the bond? And that would then provide us direction as to whether, to your point, Deborah, maybe the major factor had nothing to do with this and it had to do with external factors that we can't control at all. In which case, then maybe it isn't the right time to rerun it because that's not what was driving it. But if they were things that we can control, whether or not it was the size of the bond, whether or not it was the projects, whether or not, whatever, I would want to know so that we don't repeat the same, we don't just do the same thing and even if we were to take it in smaller chunks, people still say no because they're not the right chunks. So I want to know those things from their staff. Let's weigh in and then we'll allow the board to discuss.
I totally agree with that, and I think that, we heard a lot of things, particularly on Nextdoor, but a lot of noise. And I don't know that any of us know the answer to that. And we don't know whether it was because the ballots dropped on the day that the stock market dropped 1,000 points and then the next day it dropped another 1,000 points. We don't know if the elementary school and the mix of the projects. I think we need an independent person to get to the bottom of why it didn't pass, because it doesn't make any sense to just put it back out there and hope that we get a different result.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, piggybacking, I think that the day after is much different than the day before a vote. So to say that we've reached out to the community before the vote, and then therefore what's the point of reaching out after the vote? It strikes me as a peculiar question. So I think the question,
I didn't just say that. If you're quoting me, I did not say that.
Yeah.
Guys,
so the question, I didn't say irresponsible, I said peculiar. So to me, there's questions, is it the mix, is it the macro? And then also, is it that people want to see a plan, a long-term plan? I'm just finishing The Power Broker by Robert Moses. When you start layering long-term debt, we see it at the local level, we see it at the municipal level, we see it at the national level, you get unsustainable debt burdens in the long run. That's what we're dealing with in politics. So one of the big questions is bond versus levy. Is it a plan? Is it the projects? Is it the macroeconomic conditions? Those are the 3 big questions. And yet, it's a much different question the day after there's a vote.
And there's also the fact that some people may have regretted their vote either direction or learned more after the vote, so they may have a different opinion now. Christina.
Thank you. First, thank you for the answer. I think that I would definitely want to learn about those 43% that voted no, and understand if it's an economic factor, if it's something that we can control or not. I also, the idea of having an independent person, I like that. I do think that We should be part of the focus groups and also as a research portion of it. I think is very, very crucial that it's not us who also shift the questions to actually get a real answer of the community. I think that we can weigh in seeing, observing them, what is going to go out. But I think doing a real research and doing a real study, we will have to trust the firm that we're choosing, and we have to, this is what we have control, choose the right company that will do the research, but we also have to give validity to that process.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes. I love that.
No, I was just gonna follow up Christina's comment by asking, you can pick the firm by yourself, the board doesn't have to weigh in on your choice of firm. correct?
Yeah, I think that will be helpful when we wrap this conversation, we'll want to know what you are leaving for us, and then how do you want to participate along the way. So I've got some notes already, but we'll confirm before we're done with the conversation.
Okay, Jody.
I just want to say, I think that one of the vital reasons to ask these questions after the fact and to have an outside firm asking them is just to make sure that we're solving the problem that we need to solve. I think that, a lot of us sort of thought, well, maybe we'll just break this fund down into little pieces and people can, vote $100 million at a time or $80 million at a time. That might not be the problem. That might not have been the issue at all. I mean, people I touched with 8 times about the bond vote were, after the election, we're like, well, wait, what's a levy? What's a bond? And I'm just like, we've talked about this, I've had that so many times, maybe the way that we talk about these things is not where the community is thinking about them, and we need to, one would never say dumb it down, but make it more accessible to the widest proportion of the community. Maybe that was the issue, but who knows until we ask the questions. And I think I fully support having outside people come in and sort of help us figure out what went wrong this time so that we can do it better next time.
It's a building vote and a spending vote.
Deborah.
No,
That's so complicated.
yeah, Deborah.
I just want to reiterate, since my comments led to the further discussion, and I was tremendously misrepresented in what I said. I'm not saying I don't want to know the answer. I'm saying $30,000 is a lot of money. I'm not saying it's not worth every penny. I'm saying, why are we expecting to get different answers? I think it's crucial to get those answers. I'm just asking those questions, and it is different, but I would appreciate not being misquoted and misrepresented. It doesn't help anybody. Yeah, I'm spicy about the bond result because of all the hard work by mostly staff that went into it. And then the same group of people are going to, frankly, make up their own facts and misrepresent things. And so I'm frustrated with that, but that has nothing to do with wanting to seek out the answers to the questions that are being asked. I think it should be an outside group, but I also think one of the criticisms is that the board is not involved and seen as a driver of this, and that I think the board needs to have much more, not be the ones to ask the questions or derive the survey, but the community holds us responsible for the financial decisions. So we should be a part of that information in some way. So it's frustrating to me when I hear that I assume the city has similar process when they go out for their bond, it's the mayor going out with the city manager. And so no one's going to, well, people are still going to say it, but no one's going to be able to say, the city council wasn't involved, even though, well, I'll avoid being snarky, but we didn't have board directors doing that along with our superintendent. And is that a mistake when especially in the precursor to when you can? I assume that the city has the same rules about, campaign, quote unquote, campaigning for a bond once it's on the ballot, but I don't know that for sure. So I am very much in favor of getting answers to these questions. Again, my only hesitancy is the cost. and some way we can't get guarantees, but we need the answers from that 10% that Fred was talking about. We don't need the answers from the 30%. I'm sorry, from the 50%, frankly, who is always going to be in support of school and trusts the decision makers to be making the best decisions for the educational and financial impacts of our district. And if this is the best way to do that, then I wholeheartedly support it. I'm just, when we're looking at 30,000 here and 30,000 there, it adds up fast.
Yeah, but the cost, both in terms of time and effort and future expense of not getting the information and having another bond failed is much more significant, so.
Absolutely.
I do want to move on from this part of the discussion because I think it's pretty clear that we all do support some form of, if that's okay, Dan, unless you have anything material to add. And then-
I guess we would keep voting on whatever contract comes up,
Right.
so like we would
Yeah,
have the opportunity to ask.
But overall, clearly, we're in support of getting more information about kind of.
Great, and what I have on here, that November date at the bottom, that is purely speculation based on me. These timelines, I'm anticipating maybe November it would be, but it could be October. But so that's kind of I think the general flow of how it would go. The thing I would just remind us in terms of, kind of major projects for you as a board, between now and when there's a changeover of seats, because the EP&O levy will come up next February 10th, as Director Sullivan mentioned, December 12th is that resolution filing date. So it will be this board that will likely, if you choose to do so, who would be voting on that resolution beforehand. So the fall would be two major things that would happen in the fall. One would be results from this, and then the second would be that EP&O levy. But I think I have some great direction here. Look forward to bringing you back some pieces. I'm gonna push hard to get something selected with our team in June so that you can vote on it before we break for the summer so they can get started on their work.
That's great. That seems like a good plan as far as that portion of it goes, but I would like to have a little bit more discussion amongst the board of what we're thinking in terms of like hypothetical timing of like, if the information we get, like this will take us through like fall of this year, it sounds like, right? Like November 2025, we would be getting sort of the final results of this analysis. So clearly nothing's gonna happen before then. And especially we would not wanna run a bond at the same time as the city. That would be rude and likely to lead to failure on one or the other part. And so clearly we're looking at next year. And so my question is just, I know a lot of people were like, oh, spring break is a really tough time to be having a vote because, sorry? Spring break, yeah. Spring break is a tough time to be having a vote. My neighbor was like, why are you holding it now? And I was like, oh my gosh, there are so many reasons, But if we ran a bond in November, we're pretty much guaranteed like higher participation rates and, the suspense of like, will we get the 40% or whatever, like that part would be alleviated. So are people interested in I'm not saying, we haven't even decided if we're gonna run another bond, what it would be like, et cetera. But I'm more interested in saying, like for myself, I wouldn't see us running another bond before November of 2026. Does that make sense? Like saying like, if we only get the information about what went wrong with this bond in November of 2025, there's a whole process then after that the board will need to be involved in and the community will need to be involved in for figuring out what to do next. And I feel like it would be, if other people feel the same, then it would be helpful for the community to know just kind of what to expect, when to expect stuff not to happen. That we're not just gonna flip around and be like, okay, April, we're gonna do it again. So Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think, realistically, we're talking at least a year, at least would be my perspective. I think Issaquah shows like some of the dangers in going out too soon. And then I think there's a big question, which is sort of premature, of if we're looking at a bond or if we're perhaps a levy land. And I think that will be dependent to some extent on what we see in surveys.
Jody.
And I'd like to hear, not spot quiz, but like, I'd like to weigh in the expertise of our financial team heavily as we make these decisions. I think that they're the ones also best situated to sort of help us figure out the dates and the planning that works best for the district.
Okay, great. Store that in your brains, that question.
Future homework.
And then we have Deborah and Brett.
Oh, was that a calling on me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to make any assumptions. If we're doing a survey, let's do the survey and then make decisions as a result of that. In terms of timing, I am not persuaded that we don't want to go up against the city. I think that our community should have the choice of where we're spending the money. They're asking for a lot of money for a building that houses adults as opposed to thousands of children. And I'm not suggesting, well, I know what my feeling is, but I'm not suggesting that we know the answer to what our community says. So I'm just saying, if we're going to spend this money on a survey, let's keep all our assumptions and decisions ahead of us.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. It's just that we won't get the results of this until November of 2025, so we can't run at the same time as the city if they're running.
No,
Right.
I understand that, but the more that people say, the more assumptions people are going to make in terms of their future. We see the way that the manipulation happens, right? And that they pulled out the future work, knowing that we've got elementary schools that are going to need work, but then making these manipulating the community into thinking that we're going to be like dumping this tax burden on people, which was exactly the opposite of what the board and the long range committee intended. And so I think that making any predictions or presumptions, we need to be really careful about, because it's going to be manipulated and taken out of context. And that we need to let the survey and those that analysis speak for itself and not make predictions at this point. I'm gravely concerned that if the city bond passes, that frankly the mayor didn't support our school bond. And that needs to be said. Those are priorities, and we need to support leaders who support our schools. And the community needs to know that there's some big tax bills coming and be able to make the choices. If it is a financial decision, then the community deserves to make those choices with their eyes wide open, which hopefully this survey can help us identify.
Yeah, thank you, Fred.
This document here, I think, is a nice neutral place to point people back to, because this is the timeline of where things fall. What I didn't realize until Matt and I were talking about it 2 days ago or whatnot is how early you have to have a resolution passed before the November ballots. So all the other ones, it's within 60 days or so. This one, you can see you have to have it by the beginning of August for the November election. And so this is a nice place to just remind all of us to point people back to. And I just want to reiterate what you said, Matt, and that is February 10th, 2026 is one that, and if maybe we can highlight this and put it back up, because that's the first opportunity that we would have to run the EP&O. Doesn't mean we have to. That's our first opportunity. And then the next one would be February 2028 for the current CapTech levy. Doesn't mean we can't do a different one, but I think just that information for people is important.
One thing to just perhaps to keep in mind legislatively, I don't know if there's been any discussion ever of extending the payback period for levies, and if that takes like a constitutional amendment, or if that can be done by a simple majority in the legislature, because certainly, I mean, my own view is if it was extended too much, that sort of defeats the purpose of having a higher requirement for a bond and a lower one for a levy. But maybe there is the opportunity perhaps to extend the levy period that just legally might be easy, a better route than sort of tilting at windmills about 60% requirement for the bond, that at least I individually think is in place for valid reasons about unsustainable long-term debt. But anyway, I think something to consider is perhaps putting in some efforts to extending potentially the levy payback period.
If I may,
Yes.
there was language and talk around that in Olympia this year. What actually transpired were a House bill, Senate bill, where they actually upfront the money in a CapTech levy to use it as a quasi bond, if you will, to get around that 60% threshold. Those both failed, did not have to be made out of committee to the Senate or the House, but there is movement in Olympia.
Thank you.
Why don't we do Cap Tech update really quickly?
So, actually, can we take a break, because I have just like a family emergency that just popped up and
You're
I
the
need
president.
5 minutes, and I don't wanna be distracted, because that's very important. Sorry about that, everyone, but it's time for a good break anyway.
Great.
Thank you. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you.
Yeah, and then the other one, that's not on there, that you mentioned about.
Yeah, but.
And I have 12 minutes to cancel them. All right, I'll focus on.
Yeah.
Anything else you had, no?
Notes. Okay, we're back, Deborah. Here we are. So now we're going to do the OE11 facilities and capital assets review of capital projects.
Great. We want to give you just a prelude to all in one place, the work ahead of us that we'll continue doing to preserve our assets, but also give you this snapshot of all the things that we've done here in the last several years. I think it's helpful for you as board members, particularly when you're talking to community members, around what are the things and where are we investing in our facilities to maintain them as well. You will get your normal update in September, which is a more comprehensive update that starts to not only look at what we've done, but also starts to look at the future. But that's our November meeting, so I'll kick it over to our team.
Randy, could you have fund a smaller fund?
What's that? We're gonna have to
Thank
go
you for
ledger,
saying that.
we're gonna go to ledger size. Still trying to fit it on 8.5 by 11. Our interior painting project at the 3 elementary schools is on track. We haven't started. But we've been working really closely with the contractor and trying to figure out the exact approach and schedule. And so that will be beginning the 23rd of June and probably will go through August. Potentially, there could be some exterior painting continuing into September around the schools, but we'll see. It's a lot to get done. We have graphics and a lot of things that go with that, acoustical panels and other stuff. The high school furniture replacement, if you remember, we had talked about doing that in 3 separate summers, $200,000 a summer. So our first load of furniture comes in the week of the 4th of July, so I think that's like June 30th. And it's 10 classrooms with the furniture, including some science furniture down for Crest. And then Mary Waite Pool is progressing. Pretty exciting. We have worked with the city of Mercer Island and determined that fire sprinklers and fire alarms are not required for that particular occupancy of building. And so we're really able to take those dollars and put them towards things that I think people are going to notice a big difference in, which we're really excited about. Tony and I have done a lot of work over that pool over the years, and people walk in and say, "It doesn't look to me like you did anything," which is true, right? It's a mechanical system and it's piping. So this will be exciting. The majority of the money is going into repairs to that pool bowl to extend its life another 10 years. But the locker rooms are being renovated. And maybe renovation is too strong of a word, but there are new lockers going in and they'll be ADA compliant, and there's some new fixtures going in those spaces. Maybe the biggest change that you'll see is when you walk into the pool now, there's kind of a wall that separates you from the pool itself, which is where the OCA staff works from. And they're going to be relocated to another corner of the lobby, and that is going to be completely opened up to a small event room and a viewing area for people on the deck level. There's a bunch of other stuff like acoustic, but that's on track, and Jill Wise being a great partner, and we are hopefully going to condense that down into a 3 or 4 month construction period. We have 7 weeks of closure planned for the pool from end of July to the second week of September. Other items, high school track is really in need of replacement. We have not, when was the last time we replaced that track? Like 20 some years ago? And we did the first.
Yeah, it was in between, I think it was about 15 years.
Yeah, and it's really in need. And we think if we go ahead and stripe it again this year, that we can eke a couple more years out of it, and do it in probably 2028 when it's time to do the turf again. But we're going to try and get that painting in this summer. And then Kathy is still working on the energy compliance. If you want to give an update on that, I'll just say in my world of people, in owners reps and capital projects managers for school districts, Mercer Island is the poster child for having figured out a way to conserve enough energy that all of your buildings are compliant and no upgrades are gonna be required because of that. It's really impressive, and it's all due to,
No,
Kathy
absolutely.
gets full credit for that.
Full credit, and she has worked her tail off on this, and we are the first district of our size to be fully compliant anywhere in the state of Washington. So that's huge, and the dollar amount that we saved, that we would be going into this summer looking to have to spend just at our high school would have wiped out what we're looking at on here. I mean, that's the road that we were traveling down, and then we would be traveling down that next year at the next set of schools, so. That's just, it was amazing how much she has saved, so.
To say that Kathy is tenacious is an understatement.
Yeah.
Don't leave anything plugged in. I'll just-
No,
Even I have been trained to turn the lights out.
That's right.
That I like. So she's done a fantastic job.
Yeah, congratulations. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment, particularly given the age of our facilities, and to be able to say that we're the first of our size in the state is huge, so congrats.
Yeah, and she was trying very hard to be the first district. It was a tough week in our building when we found out that another district's high school made it before us.
So they're smaller districts than us.
But they were small,
Both of them are
right.
smaller than us.
We had to dig to find that, to build it back up, because that was devastating that someone here.
Hopefully the next annual update, that can be one of the things in the mail for the community. It's very,
Yeah.
something to be justifiably very proud of. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a great idea.
Fantastic. Any questions? No? Okay. That's great.
Okay,
Next, we have direction for the superintendent on the facility naming nomination. So I don't know if, does Tony stay with that or not really? No?
yeah, you can say.
Okay, sorry. Tony, want to stay? You want more time more quality time with us this morning, clearly.
Really, as we passed out last time, we had our first request. And so if I just kind of remind us about our process, since this is the first time that we're going through, the first thing is the collection of nominations. The way it's contemplated in policy is that community members may submit a nomination for the naming or renaming of facilities. They're submitted in writing to the board, which has taken place, including proposals and the rationale. Then we go into timing of the nominations. The way this was contemplated is that it's typically in the fall that we would be receiving them. And so the first thing we need to decide is whether or not we're going to wait until the fall to determine if there's others that come forward. But receiving a nomination, no matter what, triggers the need to form a committee. And so that committee, the way it's been put together, is either delegated to me. And so it says the appointment by the board or the superintendent for each naming or renaming process. So we need to determine how we want to move forward with the naming committee process and timing. Those are probably the two biggest things we need to determine as we exercise our policy for the first time.
Yeah, so my suggestion would be that we go ahead and name a committee now, since we've got one nomination, but that they don't actually meet or do their thing until the fall, and that gives other people opportunities to submit other nominations. And then we follow what I'm sitting here looking at our policy as well, that it looks like we would be making a decision around January or February. It says typically, but we could do it sooner, of course, and if there's only one nomination, then we can act on that whenever the committee has done their review. Yeah,
Yeah, like in terms of like the formation of the committee, I mean, to me, how that's done is I don't feel strongly about. Like, I mean, I would defer, I would say, to Fred and administration, typically how we do handle committees. For timing, other than that there needs to be an opportunity for the broader community to weigh in and to suggest other nominations. I think that has to happen. I don't feel strongly one way or the other if this should wait so it's on the same cadence as we are for future years, or for those people that have been interested, particularly in the Ed Pebble court, it's already been a very long period of time. It's been a year, and so I just put that out there, that we might want to make an exception for the first year in terms of doing it at a slightly different timing, as long as the opportunity for everyone to submit nominations is the same. I mean, we could start it now and then decide in the summer, or the conclusion of the summer. Again, I don't feel strongly about that, other than we should form a committee, let the committee decide, make sure it's open.
And just as a reminder, the committee will include at least one district staff member, a parent or guardian, no more than 2 representatives from the board, plus at least 1 district staff member, a parent or guardian, student, and community member. Christina.
I will echo that. I think that starting the committee is a fantastic a step forward. I think that the superintendent should be the one choosing it at this moment, and that we should wait until September to initiate the work, to give the opportunity for others as stated in our policy. I also believe that, I know that it has been a long process, and anyway, it's the summer coming up.
Yeah.
So the committee will not meet probably in the summer, and making exceptions on a policy that is new makes it present. So I will say just form the committee, start that work, that it will take time because you need people to be part of the committee, and then it will be ready in September when that happens, and that's it.
And then am I understanding correctly that we would name, if someone in the committee is like, I have a different suggestion, how about we name the basketball court or some other part of a building after this other person? Is there a different committee that's formed, or is that still the same naming committee?
Still the same.
Yeah,
One committee.
right, one committee. So then I think once the committee gets formed, would be a great time to reach out to the community and be like, just so you all know, this, we've had this, this nomination, and the committee's been formed and we'll meet starting in September. If there are other nominations, the same committee will consider those nominations as well and make a recommendation to the board. Like that just seems like.
And let people know that you're the kids.
And that, with the board expecting, a decision, around January.
And we could even, another option would be we could even put out that notification that the board has received a request. They're taking other requests before the committee's even formed. Right? Just say that that committee will be formed from there. It says no more than 2.
Yeah.
Do you want 0 board members on this, 1 board member, or 2 board
I
members?
think 1 board member seems fine. Like somebody who can report back to the board and see what the committee's up to, but there's no reason to overload it. It's a small committee.
I think it's important that the community has plenty of weigh-in on this. But I agree with Christina that because it is a new policy, we don't want to deviate from precedent immediately.
We didn't think of this when we were writing this policy, but it would be great to have a staff member from the school or facility that is being considered for like a renaming. I don't know how to say that. You know what I mean? So it doesn't say we can't have 2 district staff members is all I'm saying. So maybe have someone from the high school in terms of the impact, on, we had talked about geographical challenges if we rename stuff and people can't find, the cafeteria or whatever. So it would be great to have 1 other district staff member and then someone from the high school.
I think we'll exceed the bare minimum for sure on that. As we move forward. So
Yeah, I'm excited to.
do you want to appoint someone? Do you want to take people, or how do you want to?
Deborah, sorry, go ahead.
I think it's really important. I'm how do I say this? To be able to have a committee that is very neutral in terms of that there's one proposal that's starting this process, but that people have equal opportunity. I appreciate, Maggie Ty, what you're suggesting about a school person, but say we get 3 other nominations and they impact different places, but the committee's being formed now before we get other nominations. So I guess I am grateful for our administrative staff to put together the committee. I just want to make sure it's a very neutral meaning different areas and different expertise.
Sure.
in doing so. I also want to keep in mind that since the board has final approval, that we have a turnover of the board in November. I don't want to see this rushed through the process just because it's the first time. I agree that we need to be very consistent with timing and the processes that we go through. And then it's up to the committee to do all that outreach with the community to get that feedback. So I think it's important that the process be seen as really credible, that we're abiding by the things that the board's already passed.
I totally agree with that. And before everybody else, I want to recognize our students, but I did want to say there's no reason we couldn't add, like, if a nomination comes in for something at a middle school, that we couldn't add a staff member from the middle school to the committee.
I guess my point is that I don't want to see a bunch of people with special interests or strong views on what's being proposed
Totally get it.
made up of the committee.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the board turns over in December for people watching.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Ava and then Lucy.
Yeah, and I agree that the process doesn't need to be rushed, especially because like the naming is not like a thing that the district should take lightly, because like it's something that's like semi-permanent, right? And so I think the process should be long to kind of like respect that decision being made, so.
And then I'd also add, I think it'd be important for the students on the committee to be from that school, and I think that could be a good representation of like the impact in the school, because those are the students that, like, you know, are gonna be on the basketball court every day and seeing it, and, you know, making sure that those students have some sort of connection to that name and recognize what that name means. So I feel like, you know, if we're doing something, obviously the high school would be easy to get a high school student, but having some way to get student voice if we're doing something at an elementary or middle school as well, just because those students are gonna be impacted by a name in some way.
That's a great point. Christina?
I was just going to mention that, noting that we will have a turnover in December, that the Illinois School can serve, will be better to serve, or the committee will be, the three of us, that we are not in the ballot.
I nominate you.
Yeah, Susan.
I already served on the facilities naming committee, so, yeah.
And it's totally,
Yeah.
I am happy to, I was just,
There you go.
not volunteering, but I am volunteering now. I am volunteering now, okay.
And just as clarification, if it's Lucy or Ava's successor, they don't count as board members or necessarily, or they do? How do you want to?
I wouldn't count them as board members from that point of view. But they are.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
This is exciting. Policy, getting put into action. Okay. Great. Nice job, everyone, kind of staying on schedule today. Okay, our last item is board discussion on community input related to director conduct and governance. So this is something that I asked to be added to the agenda because of the I have a little prepared thing. I'm just going to read my prepared thing because of the petition that was started by a high school senior requesting that the board ban Director Lee from attending the MIHS graduation on June 16th due to the content of some of her personal social media posts. I thought it was important for the board to discuss both the specifics of graduation and kind of what the policies are there around kind of what types of protests would be materially disruptive to the proceedings versus, you know, kind of free speech rights, that sort of thing. But I also wanted to address the kind of repeated requests that we've had in email and in public comment time, asking the board or individual board members or the superintendent to take some kind of action against Director Lee because of her personal posts. So first off, about the graduation, I just wanted to make it clear to the public, I know we all know this, but that graduation counts as a board meeting. It is a meeting of the board. We cannot and we would not ban any board member from attending any board meeting for any reason. It would be a violation of state law and it would expose the board to a potential lawsuit. I also wanted to clarify that the role of the board at graduation consists of sitting on the stage and then a couple of us occasionally passing some diplomas, pushing them down the table. But as of 2024, board members no longer hand diplomas to the graduates. Finally, of course, students have a right to express themselves, but there are limits to how disruptive an act of protest can be in an educational setting. So we've asked for a report on what the plans and guidelines are so far. As far as the requests we have gotten about making statements about Director Lee's personal posts, I absolutely do understand the emotion and the intensity behind these requests. I personally will not have any part of commenting on another board member's personal political statements that have been made outside of their work duties. That's true no matter who the board member is. We do not give up our First Amendment rights when we take our oath of office as school board members. If you are unhappy personally with a board member's behavior outside of their board duties, you have the following choices as far as actual action goes. You can vote against them if they run for re-election. You can run against them if they run for re-election. You can start a recall campaign, although it will have to be approved by a judge to proceed. Certainly, you can make your opinion known via emails and public comment, but I am asking our public and our students and our parents in our district to keep things civil. Director Lee has received threats, and most recently, at least one suicide baiting email. That is never acceptable, and that is exactly the type of behavior that we do not want to model for our children. Please think about how you would like to be addressed by someone who disagrees profoundly with one of your political positions and go from there. So I wanted to give other directors, including students, a chance to comment before we get into the sort of, meat and bones of like the plans for graduation.
Okay. Sorry. A statement to read because as you know, I have not been able to respond in the last 4 months to statements or offline activity. This is gonna suck for you guys because I really cried, but sometimes we may cry when they're bad. So just to be aware that is a dynamic that happens. I want to start.
I know you're emotional, which is fine. Can you just slow down so I can understand? Thank you.
And then this will go into board docs later, so if anyone ever needs to reference this, they are more than welcome to assess the records of this meeting. I want to start by addressing the accusations of anti-Semitism that have been leveled against me. These accusations stem from a few posts that I liked or reposted in the fall of 2023 expressing dismay at the civilians being injured and killed in Gaza, and from a friend on faculty at a university upset that his students were tear gassed while non-violently protesting. I did not stop to think about how those words might strike those in our local Jewish community. Even when first called to account for those posts, I still did not fully understand their impact, but now I do. To anyone, most especially those in the Jewish community, who have experienced pain as a result of these posts, I am deeply sorry. I have had conversations with some, while others have chosen not to engage with me. I have learned how my choice to like or repost these words, given my leadership role in the community, had and continues to have a negative impact on many. It is possible for multiple things to be true at the same time. I can mourn the innocents assaulted and killed in Israel on October 7th. I can be constantly aware of the historical suffering of the Jewish people, including my own family members, some of whom narrowly escaped the Holocaust and some of whom did not. And I can still be deeply upset by the loss of civilian lives, including the lives of children, during military actions in Gaza. As I said in my statement in February, I understand now that when I joined the board, I should have been more mindful of how posts I made or interacted with on my personal social media might be interpreted in light of my new role. Moving forward, I pledge to be much more aware of how my online activity may be perceived. While I am an elected official and a school board member, I am also human, for better or for worse. I am also a mom to 2 amazing sons, one of whom still attends Mercer Island High School. The past 4 months of online and in-person verbal attacks have been very difficult for me and my family. I am a parent and a volunteer in our schools and community, no different from many here on the island who give hundreds of hours of their lives to make our schools a better place for all our kids. I'm a proud band mom, a reader, a hiker, a dog lover, and a friend. These are parts of my life that shape who I am and how I show up in every space I'm a part of. As a school board director, I remain deeply committed to supporting our students, staff, and families. Over the past 9 years, as a volunteer, I have worked hard to put students first. I ask for the chance to regain your trust if lost and to return to focusing on that work.
Does anybody else have anything to say before we get into the graduation discussion?
I do. And just like others, I am going to read this because I really want to make sure that this is in record and very clear, so I will go slow. First of all, and this is not part of what I'm going to put written down, I think that getting to this point is totally emotionally tough for every single community member in Merced Island. I'd like to offer some reflections as we prepare to address growing concerns in this community regarding recent public disclosure, social media, and calls for the removal of an elected member. This moment is complex, emotional, and deeply important. It deserves clarity, respect, and honesty. To our community and to our students, your voice, and especially the students, your voice matters. You have the right to raise concerns, ask for accountability, and expect a safe, respectful learning environment. We are listening. This district encourages civic engagement, and it is clear that some of the students that left down. That matters. We also ensure that we model as adults in how we respond, resolve conflict, and uphold democratic process. Becomes a positive example for you. That's what leadership means. That's why we must be clear about what governance requires and what it does not. School board members are elected to serve, not appointed to please others. Our responsibilities are outlined by law, by RCW 288.390015. And any formal action against a board member must follow specific legal procedures, such as those found in RCW 29A.56. The state recall process, that it is a state recall process, period. This process exists to protect democracy from being overturned by pressure of popularity alone. Personal social media content, even if controversial, does not in itself violate board policy or governance rules. Unless it breaches confidentiality, incites harm, or obstructs official duties. Free speech protection does not disappear from public officials in their personal lives. That is a loophole. That is constitutional law. If you believe that a board member conduct violates legal or ethical standards, the path forward is available. Gather evidence, file a complaint, or begin a recall process under state law. But if the concern is personal disagreement with someone believes, we must be careful not to confuse disagreement with disqualifications. This is how democracy works. We win by votes, we lose by votes. The same with the levy or the bond. And we change leadership by process, not by protest alone. This week, we have seen attempts to fast-track action outside of those norms, pressure to remove, to silence, or cancel. That's not civic accountability. That's erosion of democratic norms. We also heard hurt from students and families, and we take that seriously. We also take seriously the responsibility to protect every student's right to feel safe, valued, and heard. But to remove someone from office or exclude them from a milestone like graduation requires more than just hurt feelings. It requires evidence, legal review, and due process. Let's also be honest, the graduation is once in a lifetime moment. It belongs to students, it should be not used to settle a political dispute. To date, very few individuals have come to the board meetings to share their concerns in public comments, in favor and against. Meaningful change starts with conversation, not campaigns. If you want to be heard as a community, we need more face-to-face dialogue, more willingness to ask why, and fewer assumptions about each other's intentions. This isn't just about one person. This is about protecting the protecting democracy and the democratic process. Not because we agree, but because we understand the cost of dismantling it. We want Merced Islands where all students and families feel seen and valued. That's why we must uphold for different views and also hold firm on the value of the rule of law. So to our students, your activism is powerful, but let it begin with engagement, not exclusion. Protest has a place, so does process, and we're here to help you navigate that. So I want to move forward with integrity and not with impulse.
Thank you.
So I do not have prepared remarks, but I do have some thoughts, and that's being an elected official is tough. Being a locally elected official in a small community is even tougher. I've experienced that. I believe fundamentally that the primary relationship between members of the board is a more distant one, and I do not think that we're a family. I think that our primary relationship is with the public, and that is ultimately who we're accountable to. In the past, for actions this board has taken, I do not feel that it was appropriate. I felt it was an attempt to silence and to exclude and to settle political differences through the appearance of policy when it was really partisanship, and I do not think it was appropriate. For the same reasons, I do not think it is appropriate to settle what might be differences in values in politics by excluding Director Lee or others. But I would ask the community and the board to reflect perhaps on contradictions and how it's currently handling matters and has in the very recent past addressed other issues.
Thank you. Ava?
I want to start off by saying that I feel like, knowing you as a person, Jody, I feel like all the comments are really far-fetched, and I think that people that take the time to like see the decisions and comments that you make in the boardroom and the conversations that you have with people will know that like you're not the person that the comments and like the persona portrays you to be. And I also believe that like I agree that everyone does have a chance to voice their opinions and that people can think and feel certain ways, but I think I agree that people need to start off with like conversation rather than extreme assumptions. And I also believe that the community should focus on like approaching this with like forgiveness and understanding, especially as like if we put each other in each other's shoes and realize like we don't want, like the cancel culture is crazy, and I feel like people shouldn't be held back by like singular tiny mistakes, and that like people should forgive and move forward in a collaborative way. And yeah, in general, I'm sorry that you have to go through this, and I think that I hope you like stay true to yourself and understand that like none of this is like I feel like a lot of the things are really far-fetched and really extreme. So yeah.
Lucy and then Deborah.
Yeah, I just hope that, just from there, I hope that graduation can be a time of celebration for our seniors. And I think that includes allowing our board members to do their duties as a board member and help celebrate the graduation of our seniors. That should be a really positive and once in a lifetime moment for everyone. And so I just hope that that can be a time and that everyone can experience that time regardless of their beliefs, that other people don't influence that. And that I think board members doing their duties is a big part of that. So.
Thank you. Deborah?
I did not prepare anything ahead of time, so I'm going to make everything articulate and succinct. I'm not perfect at that. I appreciate everyone's comments very much. As a Jewish American with strong ties to Israel, I respect the fact that everyone, frankly, in the country and the world can have views that move and change with more education and exposure and life experience. I'm not suggesting that I agree. I do not agree with the interpretation of the post in question. I don't see that as anti-Semitic as a Jew. And I resent the fact that others are attempting to categorize it in the community for all. It's a very personal view. And while I know myself and other Jewish people, specifically in our community and around the world, are feeling especially frightened these days. Posts like this don't make me so. Most of us, or at least in my circle, are peace-loving, want there to be peace for all, and not see innocent people suffer. And I believe that that's what that post was suggesting, as well as the opportunity for freedom to promote your values and truth. I resent that there's community members who are attempting to silence people's views on a personal nature and doing so in a public forum. I wish that the student or students in question had reached out to the board in more than maybe an email and requesting conversations. I've never been approached as an individual board member or as a member of the Jewish community to have a conversation about concerns or feelings. And I wish that had happened. I very much agree with everything that Christina said, who took the time to prepare statements. And so thank you for those statements. I'm not going to point out everything that I've appreciated, but in terms of we need to focus on engagement rather than exclusion. We know we're an education system. And we know that our students benefit when they make mistakes. And I'm not suggesting a mistake was made here, but when students make mistakes, that we bring them in and circle around them and educate. And I would hope that we do that for all of our community members and not just our students, because that's the way that we become a stronger community. I think it's actually really important to see in a small community such as ours, the difference between action taken in the boardroom, action and behavior taken in the boardroom, and action and behavior taken, frankly, prior to even becoming a board director. We either believe in democracy and free speech or we don't. And while I disagree, I have a different interpretation of Dan's feelings with regards to prior action taken by the board for board policy. I very much appreciate his words in terms of free speech and the ability to advocate in the way that we believe is right. And I believe fundamentally that I respect those views. I respect the different views on that. I don't agree that it was a political retaliation, but I respect that other people feel differently than I do. I am open to engaging. I, as a Jewish board member, reached out to people who have had concerns in the last 6 months. And it was very, very frustrating and disappointing that zero accepted the invitation to meet with myself and Superintendent Rendell. That was an opportunity for engagement and inclusion and hearing feelings. I want to reiterate that feeling, at least on a point of me, and I'm to assume other board directors, and I know for Superintendent Rendell that those invitations continue. that we are always happy to meet with community members. And frankly, we'll always prioritize the views of our students, or not the views of our students, but the opportunities for our students to engage with us and to hear those views. We might not always agree, and we might not take action as a result of it. But I think that we all, as Dan said, our responsibility is to our community. Very much embrace that role, that part of our role as being a board director. So I appreciate this conversation. I urge those with different views and keeping in mind the limitations of what our board director's role is, that with regards, as much as we are seen as political, that it's politics because we're elected officials, that our role in quote unquote politics is very limited. We have very specific role and obligation within the bounds of the law with regards to the education of our students. That's it. We don't have any impact on international politics, global decisions. We have impact on our Island students and the decisions that we make. And if anyone believes that a decision that we made in the boardroom with regards to the education of our students and believes we violated those values in some way, please reach out. But that's what we were elected to do. And I would just encourage those also in mirroring what others have already said, reach out. We're very approachable. There's no retaliation. I know people love to say that. Give an example if someone's felt retaliated against. I've never seen it, and I've never had anyone come to me with what I've seen as an actual form of retaliation for speaking your mind. In fact, I think that we bend over backwards to make sure we listen to our voices. As an example, after October 7th happened, and I made a statement as a Jewish community member in the board, it was pointed out to me that as a board director in that setting, it could be that it was concerning to people with different views and different experiences. And I take note of that. I don't believe that I've made any statements since then as a board director, obviously other than this one right now that pertains much more to anti-Semitism than being pro-Israel, which in personal view I am, that I've been much more aware of my impact on statements that I make during a board meeting on any political process as a result of making sure that I want to include all views and all community members in the decisions that I make for the board. And I hope that I've, moved towards achieving that. So that's exactly the opposite of retaliation. And I would hope that people feel comfortable coming forward, whether it's in an individual basis or to the board. We've never had public input from a student asking for anything or individual conversations, and that's the place to start. It's those individual conversations. People carry far less weight, at least for me personally, than individual conversations. And just because it's one student doesn't mean it doesn't carry great weight. It's just the manner in which those changes are attempted. So thank you for the time. And I very much appreciate having this conversation.
Thank you, Deborah. So Fred, do you want to tell us a little bit about what the plans are at the high school?
Sure, and I'll bring up our principal, Mr. Nick Wold, and our assistant who orchestrates all the behind the scenes, Kristen Brittenall, to help with this. In our governance model, we have lots of policies and procedures that help to orchestrate our work, whether or not it's now naming a facility, if it's how we interact as a superintendent, as a board, and being your employee as the board. I have 5 of you that I try to maintain relationships with. And then ultimately the most important relationship for us is me with the entire board. You have OEs that are expectations of me, both of deliverables as well as feedback mechanisms, and I'll continue to be committed to those and use policy governance the way that you've hired me to provide the feedback necessary to you. With respect to graduation, I want to turn our attention to our policy, and if you'll bring that up, Andrews. It is 2410, and it's really the procedure that really spells out what we have in place for graduation procedures. Of note, it really talks about the regalia and of what students wear, the types of accessories, students' participation, and needing to be part of the rehearsal ceremonies. And I think it goes back to what Ava and Lucy were both saying is it's the senior class's graduation. It's not one person's graduation. It's not our graduation. It's really, this year will be Ava and her colleagues. But I want to stress before I turn it over to Nick and Kristen to talk a little bit more that how we plan to prepare for this year is the same as we always do with our students. And that includes a number of conversations that have already been happening, but then there'll be another one, I believe it's next week, when all the seniors come together and we really set that expectation. So I wouldn't want something to be construed that we've changed policy or that we're changing anything. It's really designed so that we can have the best graduation possible. So with that, let me turn it over to the two of you.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. And actually, I appreciate you guys addressing the concern brought by students and so forth too. I mean, if this is a value in our school district of broadcasting student voice, then I think that we need to address these things. So I think it's appropriate. I appreciate it. And Lucy and I got a chance to talk about it in our weekly meeting yesterday. Lucy and I did, because you know, where does the student interaction and their education of their peers also come in play? And so we had a good, thoughtful conversation about what that intersection looks like too, Fred, just because they are in the streets with students every single day in their classes and get a chance to spend time educating them about the issues and so forth too. So I just appreciate that you guys are addressing this. I will say we had no intentions of changing our process and practice because we've had graduations that have been thoughtfully prepared and curated over time. And some of these things will begin next week. They've begun in many different conversations with our seniors over time about what are appropriate behaviors and what are the types of things that we expect for our young people in all ceremonies and so forth. So that is in a senior class meeting that will happen next week, where we'll talk about some of the expectations around regalia and so forth. Cap and gown is a part of that. Just for an example, we'll talk about things that are put on the top of their caps. That's a very common place where they like to express themselves in a variety of the university they may be going to may have a logo or emblem that they want to amplify certain aspects of that logo. So we talk to them about what's appropriate, what's not, and so forth. We talk about noisemakers. We talk about a variety of things that are a disruption to a ceremony that, as Lucy said, is a celebration of our seniors, but really it's a celebration of K-12 learning, and it's a celebration of parents, family members, grandparents, all the people that are in that room that have helped our students get across the stage. So it is a celebration of our entire community that helps our students cross the stage. So we start to talk about the nuances, and our students, and in particular this senior class, like to push the envelope and go to the edge of these policies in many different ways. And so I like to really get into the weeds and details behind what the policy really, the intent behind it. If you look in that article, Fred, of that policy I think it's D, that talks about graduation ceremonies in a manner that is consistent with MISD code of conduct. Well, there's a lot of soft language in code of conduct that is subjective, and that creates interpretation, and that is for our team, including all of our team members that talk to students about what those interpretations are. So I get into the details about what I would think as a disruption or not a disruption, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. And so we get into those details and so forth. And then, failure to comply with those things can have a student removed from the graduation ceremonies. But just to be real, it would have to be pretty egregious. We're talking about the graduation ceremony of a life of learning inside of our school district. And so, and I try and walk those things out with our students very clearly. Yes, next week is a start. It has been touched there's been touch points throughout the year, but then there'll be during senior checkout, senior tea, there's a variety of different activities where we'll continue to remind our students about what these ceremonies really represent. And then Kristen, will you go first? And then I see Dan's thing turn. So Kristen, anything that I
let me build one more piece to it and then go over there. And that is something that we work really hard on as a school district, and I think all school district is really understanding where that line is of free speech of students. And the court case that we always go back to is the Tinker versus Des Moines court case. And that really set the benchmarks for all school districts. And in their ruling, they were very clear, the Supreme Court, that neither students nor teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. And that the criteria that's used is unless something is posing a material and substantial disruption to the learning environment, or in this case, our graduation ceremonies, that there is opportunity for free speech. Now, there's lots of latitude in there, and I think that's where the messiness comes in for administrators, is what constitutes material and substantial disruption. The court case was based on students during the Vietnam War wearing armbands and coming to school with them. And the school district was prohibiting them from putting those on. And what the court ruled is simply putting on those armbands and being at school, unless it's causing commotion among students, unless it is, creating a major distraction, that is appropriate and that students can do that. We've had students wear things at school that have created disruption, whether or not it's an inappropriate logo that has phallic symbols on it or whatnot. If students in a classroom are talking about it and they're not learning, we have a disruption. But it is clear that our students, just like us as employees, you as board members, you don't shed your rights. And so that's the fine line we walk, and that's the standard we use when making interpretations. Kristen, and then we'll take questions.
Yeah, I don't really have that much to add to that, other than, we are very clear with the students as far as the communication of what their graduation day is gonna look like. And it is jam-packed. And we also have plenty of staff members that are present, that are guiding them from one stage of their day to the next. And it's very busy, and we're very focused on that day. And all of this is going to be communicated next Wednesday during Islander Hour to our students. And a part of that message is also finishing strong. And there's interpretation in that too, and what that means. And but we want June 16th. It's a celebration for our students, for our staff, for families, and such a major community event that we are focused on keeping it positive and a celebration for all of our seniors and having it be a special day for their families.
And maybe to just add on, and then Dan, I'll go to, I guess, you first. When we go through this we do an individual check of our students throughout, at regalia and to have conversations, so forth, but we're not searching our students. This is not, we're in a place of education. And so you'll see, if you were to do any kind of graduation search and see ceremonies that have gone awry, you'll see things that have happened to boards and principals and staff members throughout time, things that they have brought in, obviously air horns and things like that. We don't want those things to join graduation, but we've seen it be in pockets where people have dropped golf balls and they've done things that have been silly in nature, and then other times less silly, that have created a distraction, but not necessarily a disruption. And then sometimes it's a passive way to create a disturbance, but not necessarily a disruption in that way. And so some of those things I have seen, and we obviously educate our students about what that looks like. But yeah, those things are things that we're already hearing and rumors that are kind of circling around. So we do our best to help our students know that this is a celebratory time and that we don't want those things to be a part of our ceremony. And then we trust that we've done a good job along K-12 learning of using that space in the most appropriate way. Dan?
Yeah, one observation, then one question. So one, looking at the policy, like red sort of strictly looks like it's probably more restrictive than the First Amendment allows. I mean, it looks like apart from tribal regalia, that everything else could be banned. I don't think the law allows that. Certainly, like past practice hasn't. Going to tinker, and then the question on that, like with respect to tinker, is sort of like the specific examples. I assume that if a student were to wear or to pin a pride flag like on their cap, that wouldn't be an issue. I assume it wouldn't be an issue if there was a Ukrainian flag or a watermelon or an Israeli flag. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about that all of that is permitted speech, at least on its own, without anything other.
That's correct. And I as you create those examples, we've seen those examples, and those all have made through graduation in that way. Yep.
Deborah?
And I mean, I agree, and I think it's great. I know that how the school, communicates this to graduates and makes it understanding. And I know, I assume that part of the message is, this is your opportunity to shine, and keep in mind that you're going to look back on this day forever. And what is it that you want to remember? Like one moment in some political time, or do you want to remember your entire, K-12 education and growing up in this community? I do want to point out that there are many, many schools in our area that do not allow graduates to decorate their caps. And they do that because of, just the experience of frankly not wanting to deal with it anymore. And it's not a violation of tinker when it's only, like what Dan said, when it's only limited to what the law actually allows, which is tribal regalia. And schools don't have to allow anymore. And as long as it's equally, put in place across the spectrum. So keep in mind that you're making decisions not only for yourself, but for the future, for future classes. And that I would hate to see, like, their students have fought. My sister teaches at East Lake High School, and they until this year have not allowed cap decorating. And this year they are. So I would just say, if that's not something you want to see happen, just make sure that you're making choices that you're gonna be proud of. And I am very pleased with the policy as it's implemented now, that we give that freedom for our students to individually celebrate what it matters to them. And just keep in mind that the actions will have long-term consequences. And just like everything does, we don't change things unless there's an abuse of them. And so I don't expect there to be any issue. I'm pleased that this happened in time for it to be addressed and to make sure that we communicate our concerns and expectations. But it is a privilege to get to decorate your cap and express yourself. And I very much hope that privilege continues into the future.
Dan, can I respond to that before you ask?
Me too, it's specific to that.
Oh, sorry, yes,
Go ahead.
yeah, I just, we actually 7 or 8 years ago tried to take on cap decorations, and I'll tell you, it is a far more cumbersome endeavor. So yeah, we have allowed for cap decorations, and we do preview them. And just to give you an inappropriate example, but just for the sake of what we would look at and so forth, Fordham University, FU, middle fingers, things like that. It seems silly now, but this is a classy engagement of time to celebrate graduates. So then we pull that student aside, have the conversation to say, hey, look, we are presenting this to your grandparents, your family, everybody else. We don't want a middle finger on your cap. You think this is funny, this is not your moment in this time. And we have that conversation in a very direct, sensitive, thoughtful way. I'd say 100% of the time they go, okay, and they smile and they take it off. And it's one of those things. We try and do that well in advance so that it's not a disruption in the live time in front of people to have any kind of shame in that way. But we have had these types of conversations to kind of tease out what is appropriate, what is not in that way. And it's again, subjective. I understand that that's the role that we play, is to try and get into those weeds. And I just, so we have taken it on, we choose, as opposed to taking a blanket statement, to educate when those circumstances come up.
To avoid any confusion, I believe that decorating one's cap is not a privilege, but it's a right. I think that's what Tinker holds. Those districts that do not allow cap decorations, I think are subject to First Amendment scrutiny. Now, within Tinker, it cannot be disruptive, and what leads to disruption right now, there's some cases the Supreme Court declined to take that gets to that question. That was the reason my examples focused on symbols that I think we can all agree are not problematic in and of themselves. But I think this idea that people can lose the free right speeches guaranteed under the First Amendment if we decide as a board to take them away, we can't take them away. That's the reason they're First Amendment.
Okay, I'm not gonna weigh in on the hat thing because it's kind of, I remember 7 or 8 years ago when there was kind of an attempt to sort of rein back the hat things, although as a graduate of Fordham University, I have to say, I cannot believe that kids in hat. When I graduated.
Way to bring
my
that
son-
up, sorry.
It's a lemonade. Although at my own Fordham graduation, actually, of course, it was a graduate graduation, right? So like everybody had messages on their hats rather than, which we see some of here. I do think the districts that don't allow hat decoration, it often has to do with not wanting to make some students feel bad, because other students are like, look at me, I'm going to Harvard, and then.
That was our attempt. Actually.
Yeah, that was kind of, I think, what was behind that. I would be hypocritical if I said that, no one should ever protest anything at graduation, because I protested at my own college graduation. The speaker was Colin Powell, and it was 1993, and we were protesting the don't ask, don't tell policy. But it was a giant outdoor graduation. Our protest was silent. We were all carrying pink balloons. And if anything, it just kind of added to the, spirit of the day, I think. Yeah, I think this is really helpful to hear kind of the guidelines that you set out for the students. And I hope that students and family members will remember that this is like everyone's day. This is your last time. This is their last time to be together with their whole high school class and all their families, the first time to be together with all their families, and like to just make choices about what they're going to do or not do, say or not say that don't impinge on other people's, celebration of everything that they've accomplished, so, yeah. Fred, sorry, and then if students want to weigh in, then I'll.
Just to kind of add in, I think, the pink balloons made me think about, what are those accessories or things that they have? And, if the balloons are huge balloons or they're whatever, and they're blocking people's views or they are getting in the way, it becomes a challenge. And those things then we will address without question on that. I do think that there is room for healthy debate. We don't need to have it because we're not getting rid of the mortarboard decorations, but I've heard similar pieces that it comes down to where does dress code intersect with First Amendment. And I think something that our district did do some number of years ago that was not at the time maybe seen, there was unpopular for some is, we went from having gender-based colors in our graduations where we used to have, if you identified as female, you wore white, and if you identified as male, you wore maroon for the caps and gowns. And the movement at that time was we would go to all maroon. And I think that's an example. There was a lot of conversation with PTA, a lot of conversation with the Principals Advisory Council and others. But we always try to make thoughtful decisions that are for the best of all students and for the ceremony itself. So I've commended the team over the years of having some of those conversations. So I don't know, it's your graduation.
Just building it, just
Sorry.
Just adding for a second to what Fred said, I'm sure McGraw Hall will have some thoughts about balloons.
Oh, yeah, let's not.
Like that is not gonna be an option.
Sorry, I didn't,
That was an outdoor ceremony.
that was an outdoor ceremony with like 20,000 people, so, and there was no one sitting behind us. Let's not ruin things at McGraw Hall. My understanding is that Mercer Island High School was banned from McGraw Hall after some incidents in the 70s, the previous building. after some incidents of the graduation in the 1970s. It wasn't, it was the Opera House, whatever the.
Yeah, that's news to me.
Yeah.
Benaroya, is that what?
No, not Benaroya, like the Opera
We were
House.
banned from there?
Yes, apparently there was like
This is our year.
damage done behind the scenes by students who were, it was the 70s, who were smoking. They were smoking and they were a bunch of stuff. I'm just saying, this is our first chance to get back there, people, let's not blow it. Yeah, sorry, students.
No, yeah, I appreciate like the fact that our school district allows students to express ourselves by decorating caps. Like many of my fellow classmates, like that's a really like a highlight of their year, like being able to decorate their caps and do all these things. Yeah, and I think it's important to preserve that as we go forth, but also like grounding it in definitely like, oh, this is not about you, this is about everyone right now, so.
Yeah, and I feel like the restrictions are reasonable. I mean, they're just kind of the same things we would expect of students at schools. So I feel like students know the expectations, and if it's not, I don't think anyone thinks they're unreasonable.
Thank you, yeah, Kristen.
I just wanted to say, this is my 8th year that I'm planning graduation, and even though we have had hiccups and things previous to the day that we've dealt with, and I have yet to experience a graduation day where our students have put the celebration in jeopardy. They show up ready for a great day, and they've never had an experience, as long as I have been working with them, that we've had anything less than an amazing celebration to so let them revel in all of their accomplishments for K through 12, so.
Thank you. Christina, yeah.
And I don't know where you're gonna take this conversation after. I do also want to say I agree with everything that has been said. And also I want to open the opportunity for all the community members that totally disagree with what we're saying, and those who totally agree, and all in between the gray areas, to have a conversation, invite us. Like you can ask the superintendent and one of us to attend to one of the meetings. We are really open to have a dialogue on where do you think, I don't know, the morality of how our community is. Like we represent the community, but have conversations before we go again and do something like this. I think that this is also a lesson for students, how when we say your digital life is forever and is public for everybody, this is what it is. And it's also for the students who made the petition, and it's for all of us that we are in the public eye day and night. It is true. So I open this invitation for the community, because this message does not have to stay in this study session, it has to go beyond. It is, we are an island, and we need to work as a community with all of.
Well, I'd like to comment on that.
And then Deborah, after your comment.
I appreciate you saying that, Christina, because as I'm listening, as I mentioned earlier, a value in our district is broadcasting student voice, and we don't muzzle that voice. We do not. We don't. I'm going to be doing something with Lucy and Ava coming up here with another school district, and I told them, I said, I'm not going to frame this for Ava and Lucy. They get a chance to speak their mind, and I'm not going to prep them to say a certain thing based on us spending time with the school district. So this is a value for students to express themselves, and our board is accessible. So, there are means and ways for you to show your voice, and there's several different avenues to do that, but our board is accessible. So you can go and have that conversation, and I would invite students that want to have voice to this to have the conversation. That is a healthy practice inside of our system, is to have dialogue, because I think that's great growth for our students and for our adults in governing positions and leadership positions, to have dialogue. So Christina, I appreciate you opening that invitation for our students to have that. And I think that we've had board members in our school, and Ava and Lucy have had our board members come in to have thoughtful conversation. That is always going to be a value inside of our building. So I hope that our students take our board members up on that invitation in that way.
That's great, thank you. Deborah.
Thank you. So my question actually relates to what Nick just said. my question, and normally I wouldn't ask this in public because it's about a student or a small group of students. But have you been able to but it was made public, so that's why I'm asking it, and be as specific or non-specific as you want in the answer. But have you been able to have conversations with this group of student or any student that has either authored or signed this specific petition in order to make sure that their concerns are being addressed?
Are you asking me, Deborah, specifically?
Yes, I am asking you specifically. And like I said, only because it was made public. If it wasn't made public, I wouldn't be asking you in public.
So I will say two comments. When I've received a student's name that they signed any type of a petition in that way, and I have a relationship with that student prior to this meeting, I just had dialogue. I just chatted with them about, do you know the issues? Do you know what's going on? Sometimes, respectfully, sometimes people sign petitions and they actually don't know the issues or the values, but they see their friends that are associated with it and they jump into this. That happens with petitions. This isn't unique to us. This is just petitions. You're at the grocery store, petition happens, you sign, you move on. But I will say, so some of those, when I've heard the actual student name and I have a relationship with them, I've had that dialogue for sure. Now that this study session has happened, it might be an opportunity for me to then go and have some further conversation with some of the students' names that I know to be maybe leading some of those conversations in that way. It could be an opportunity for Ava or Lucy to have that conversation as well as peers with those students as well. So I'll just say in pockets, Deborah, that's my way of answering.
And Nick and I discussed this for the first time last Friday. We meet again tomorrow. Some of it is just monitoring what's happening. What are we hearing? I met with Ava and Lucy yesterday or Wednesday. So yesterday to go over the final SSA agenda. We talked about this. So a lot of it right now is just keeping our fingers on the pulse to make sure that we're walking that the line. But plenty of conversation, and we're still 2 weeks away from graduation too. So I know it feels fast coming, especially for the person who's behind the scenes planning the whole thing. But for others of us, wow, that seems like an eternity right now. So, but we will be monitoring, just like we do with all incidences, whether or not we start getting tips on senior breaks and some other things like that. Sorry, it's that time of year. Hey, we gotta be ready.
Go ahead.
Just in response, I presume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that part of the education of student voice is hearing voices and not necessarily getting one way. That sometimes it can lead to change and sometimes it won't lead to change.
I mean, yeah, to respond to that, and then I think Ava's thing is up. I mean, it's for me, it's dialogue and conversation and education, and it's not to, hey, you really should do this or do that. It's not directive in that way. I mean, again, if it's a value, then it's about a conversation and not a direction in that way. There's times that I have to be directive. This is not that time. It's a time to learn, and really for me, it's to listen more, to understand what our students are saying in that way. And I think that our students would say that I'm also accessible, so I have these conversations. So yeah, I mean, it's not directive, it is a learning and listening opportunity for me too, Deborah.
Ava. And I'll just say, like, as a senior that knows a lot of the people that have signed, like, I've reached out to a lot of people I personally know, and I asked them, like, what are they feeling, having that discussion. And, like, I feel like overwhelmingly the sentiment is, like, oh, my friend sent this to me in a group chat, and they told me to sign it, so I did, and like a lot of people didn't even read it. So I'd say, yeah, it would be, to move forward, I think there's a lot more conversation with like the people that are leading it rather than the people that are signing it. Because I feel like a lot of people that are signing it are doing it just to like hop on, so yeah.
Which is not to say that other people might not be signing it out of like, profound belief, but yeah. We are done pretty well on time for today. We are 7 minutes over. Is there any final?
I do have a question, and not necessarily for you. I think it's for us as a board. I know we had this discussion, And at the same time, I wanna ensure that how are we going to ensure that this conversation that we had is absolutely out in the community, that they understand what we have said. And it's, because I think that one of the problems that we had, how this became such a big issue, is that Jody is a picture. They took a pixel and they expanded it, and that's the picture that they have posted, regardless of the rights or not. So right now, we are looking at a pixel, and if the rest of the community never hear this conversation, and how we govern, how we work, it's gonna be very hard to move with the community, to build this community in a dialogue. And this is a question for all of us, like, is there something that we would like to do to ensure that our conversation, or by just like by public record, just to ensure that it's a special session. We are not watched as much as others. We don't have people attending tonight. So amplifying this conversation matters.
I mean, that's an ongoing question for the board, right? Like we had the board buzz, and now we have the board summaries, right? That Ian is producing, but like how to get the word out about, like, I think a lot of our most thoughtful conversations and work happens during these study sessions. So it's kind of a perennial problem. And there's, one can hope that the, local paper will cover it fairly at some point. But I don't really have a good answer. You personally, there's nothing preventing anyone who's watching or anyone who's participating from grabbing the video and circulating it to friends, like once the video goes up, or you can take a snippet of the video and be like, watch this last 15 minutes, it's like really important. So that's the best I can suggest, yeah. Thanks, Nick. Yeah. Anyone have anything else? No, thank you all so much for being here today. So glad that we have that you guys now have an excused absence and that you are able to join us. So your own policy work in action. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning this meeting, please say aye. Students?
Aye.
Board members?
Aye.
That's 2050. Thank you so much, everyone.
Lucy, did you have science testing this morning?
Yes.
How was it?
It was good, not too hard. So
Aye.
I have a question for you.
I have a hidden gem from
Right.
the hall.
Really quick.
Yeah,
So here's why I know this, because my,
Parking.
this handed down into work.
And it didn't get to use, yeah.